This is a Newslaundry podcast and you're listening to NL Hafta.
अंग्रेज अपना लगान और न्यूज लॉन्ड्री अपना हफ्ता कभी नहीं छोड़ते. We are back with another episode of Hafta. This is the 301st and this one too we are recording from our homes and not from office like we usually record, because there has been one more case of COVID, and until we get everybody tested and make sure that all the producers and editors are fine, we shall not all be assembling at office like we do every Thursday to record the Hafta. So it is 12 noon. We are recording from home. And this week, there will be no tippani or nuisance either, because we just want to make sure that we don't get people together in office until everyone's been tested. And I think most tests have been done.
I got tested yesterday, and contrary to my fear, it's not that painful. It was okay.
Okay. So
I thought you would really put something drastic up my nose, but it was fine.
So before I introduce our panel, other than the announcement that we will not be uploading nuisance and tippani this week, I wanted to ask all our viewers and listeners and subscribers what you think of our new website. Please send us feedback because this website is just about a week old. We are still fixing some glitches. So do give us feedback, because we're going to be incorporating a lot of those things. And regarding the podcast player, many of you can't find the podcast player. It's on the top right-hand corner in the shape of a mic. So when you click on that, it drops down the full podcast list, the player, and it is a brand new podcast player created especially for you. I shall tell you a little more announcements that we have. But first, on the panel today is Manisha. Hi, Manisha.
Hello.
Mehraj coming to us from his home. Hi, Mehraj.
Hello.
And joining us on the phone line from Delhi, though she has recently returned from Bihar, is Arfa Khanum, who will be telling us a lot more. Hi, Arfa.
Hi, everyone.
So, Arfa, I'll just give a little bit about you, though I'm sure most people would know who you are. You have been a reporter with NDTV you've been, I think, 2 decades in the journalism now.
Yes.
And most recently, you are doing a lot of stuff for Wire. You've done a bunch of interviews, some ground reports, and we hope you will regale us with some stories of Bihar, since you were there for just about a week or under a week. But did you get tested after you got back? Because I saw the rallies there. It's insane.
Well, I was advised to, but I kind of quarantined myself for about a week, and I found there was 0 symptoms. So I didn't want to go through what Manisha has, because I've already tested myself twice and I came negative. So I didn't want to go for the 3rd time.
Right. So, but did you maintain better social distancing than, say, what I saw Srinivasan Jain of NDTV maintaining, where he was really going into people? And
well, I think that the only option reporters like me had were to protect themselves. So I was all masked up all my almost less than a week time there. In fact, in Tejashwi Yadav rally, I don't know whether you watched the video, there were this sea of people without masks, and everybody got scared just by looking at the picture. So I think the only thing that you could do was to save yourself. So I did that, and thankfully I'm fine.
Right. So before we discuss Bihar elections and many other things, Manisha, can you give us the headlines of what made the news this week?
Yes, the biggest news of the week was Republic TV editor Arnab Goswami being detained in a 2018 suicide abetment case. He's been sent on a 14-day judicial remand. Additionally, Mumbai police constables have filed an FIR against Arnab Goswami, his wife and his son for allegedly obstructing police officers from carrying out their duties. This is something we will discuss in great detail. At Bihar, protesters threw onions at CM Nitish Kumar's rally in Madhubani. 53.51 voter turnout by Tuesday at 5 p.m. in the elections, and results will be out on November 10th. UP is working towards a law to curb incidents of love jihad. Haryana, Madhya Pradesh and Karnataka might follow suit. Amrinder and Sidhu were spotted at a rally together in Jantar Mantar in protest, and that's unusual. Massive protests in Goa against making the state a coal hub. Ministers ensured a cap on coal imports. Meanwhile, US elections have been the talk of town all over, I think, in India and the world around. Biden is leading with a historic vote record. Democrats retain control of the House, and there's a tie in the Senate. The elections are still ongoing, and as we speak, votes are being counted. But Trump already has declared victory, and he said that they should finish voting, and he's claimed fraud, and he said he'll go to Supreme Court to dispute the counting. He's also sued in 3 states. Meanwhile, Trump supporters have also converged on voting counting centers in Detroit and Phoenix and urged to stop the voting. So there's full-on conspiracy theories.
Although it is all counting, voting was over when it was supposed to get over.
Twitter flags Donald Trump's tweet after he accused Democrats of stealing elections. In India, opposition has asked Tamil Nadu governor to free Rajiv Gandhi's case convicts. Back in US, Indian origin congressman wins US House race for third term. Delaware and Vermont will elect their first US transgender state legislators. ISIS has claimed credit to Vienna terror attack. 2 men and 2 women died of wounds after gunmen opened fire at 6 locations in Vienna. This was on Monday. On Thursday last week, a woman was beheaded as 3 people were killed at a church in France. The mayor has dubbed it a terror attack. This happened in the French city of Nice.
Right. So that's all that made the news, and I'm sure there's lots to discuss. The US election has kept us all, I guess, entertained in the last few weeks. But let's first start with the Bihar election. Since Arfa has been there, she can give us some sort of an idea. Arfa, just give us an idea of what is the general turnout there like? Are people excited? Are they getting out? Or because of COVID, rallies are not that well attended? From what one reads in the newspapers, it is open season for Nitish. I think even BJP is doing their slimy bits to thwart Nitish. And I just saw a speech where Nitish has obviously, in reference to Yogi Adityanath, said, "Ye sab faltu baatein hain, bakwas baatein hain," because in a speech, Yogi Adityanath had said, "Sab infiltrators, bahar walon ko hum bhej denge wapas." Of course, that's his dog whistle for Muslims. But I guess he means that people who don't get an NRC or C. I don't know what Adityanath means. But Nitish, if you see that speech, has said, "Koi bahar ka nahi hai, sab Hindustani hai, sab Indians hai." So clearly all is not well between the BJP and Nitish as well. So has Nitish been isolated? Is Tejashwi also attacking him? BJP also treating him like shit? Is it curtains for him? Or is he the quintessential survivor like he has survived for so long?
This, I think, gives away the whole story and the whole infighting within that NDA house. That Nitish Kumar still is popular amongst the Muslim voters. That what I could get from there, speaking to maybe a variety of people from different caste groups, even within Muslims. But then Muslims are going to be very wary of going for Nitish, voting for him, because this eventually will mean again voting for the BJP. So as much as Nitish Kumar, I wouldn't call him a pro-Muslim leader, but he is certainly not an anti-Muslim leader, and he tries to reach to his Muslim voters, which he did even this time around, even if this meant publicly kind of giving it off to Yogi Adityanath, and that too publicly. And in Simanchal region, where we heard things like this BJP guy saying in a public rally, Jinnah ka Munna, to this guy, Aligarh Muslim University ka Students Union ka former president, Mashkoor Usmani. They tried all of their best to create this controversy around this young Muslim leader who I tweeted, and a lot of people kind of trolled me for this. I said, even in this very broken democracy of ours, where we have seen in the last 5-6 years such anti-Muslim politics, where, from legal to every which way, they're trying to kind of disempower them. And even then, young Muslims are standing up and trying to look for a bright future in India's democracy. So that aside, I've covered several elections. Even last Bihar election also I covered. I also went last year to Bihar. But trust me, I think I have never found such a strong undercurrent for a leader. And that too, like Tejashwi Yadav. So why I'm saying this is that Tejashwi Yadav is not somebody, a new face. He comes with a baggage. Some people can say it's also a legacy. So for some people, Lalu Yadav is a legacy. For some, it would be a baggage. I saw Tejashwi very conflicted, that he did not know whether to call his father a legacy or maybe a baggage. There are different kind of advisors. I don't think I can say it as much on the show because they wouldn't like to be named, but there are different kind of advisors Tejashwi has at the moment. Where some of them would actually try to kind of project him as Akhilesh Yadav was projected in 2017, if you remember, in assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh, very much on the lines of, inspirational India, inspirational Uttar Pradesh, Kalka Uttar Pradesh, not really considering that nothing can be said and nothing can be concluded without keeping the history in mind. And history in Bihar or Uttar Pradesh, especially in Bihar, the 15 years, that the BJP is trying to project it as Jungle Raj, and also called it Tejashwi Yadav ko that he is Yuvraj of Jungle Raj. Yes. Which means they again trying to consolidate the same upper caste anti-RJD voters. So I thought what the strategy of the RJD was, which is actually also leaving a lot of people angry, kind of cheated. people who believe in the politics of social justice, who believe in not just a pro-backward politics, but also they say it cannot be done without an anti-upper caste politics, anti-forward politics. Because remember, the whole politics of Lalu Yadav it had not just undercurrent, I would say, on the face of it, very overtly. It wasn't a contempt for the upper caste. If you remember this quote, this phrase that he used to use, Bhura Bal, which means Brahman and Banya, unke khilaf, Bhura Bal hatao was the slogan. So what I'm trying to say here is that even if Tejashwi Yadav, he comes with this very strong legacy or baggage, he's trying to present himself as this new leader who is for development, who's for economic justice, who's going to give new Bihar. He's an old person. He may be a new guy. He may be a new young man of 31 year old, but he cannot be seen without Lalu Yadav.
But tell me, not that I'm the typical voter that political parties in Bihar are trying to attract, but I just get a very bad vibe from Lalu's son. He seems like the kind of kid who, once he gets power, he'd be even worse than Lalu was, in the sense of, when that rally happened and people walked into auto showrooms and took cars on buses, they just took it. You couldn't say anything. He ran it like his backyard. This boy, and I think, and all the, jhagras that happen within their family with that other brother who dresses up as sometimes as Krishna, sometimes as a girl, sometimes as Radha. They just seem very gharelu type, ki bhai ghar ki kheti hai, very betakalluf. There's no formality to them, their plan of running the party or the state. But is that what you get from him? You've met him. Do you think he really understands the significance of governance, or he'll be a chutta saan jise kehte hain?
I think I disagree with you, Abhinandan. This is, I would say this is a very upper caste narrative. I would say this is a very Delhi journalist narrative. We know that Indian media, particularly the Hindi media, is so heavily upper caste. And the Hindi media people, more than 70% of them come from UP and Bihar, and they come with their biases. They come with their narratives. So to brush the entire 15-year rule of Lalu Yadav without actually putting it in black and white what Lalu Yadav achieved, that would be a huge injustice to his legacy. And as someone who truly and very deeply and passionately believes in the politics of backward people, and I believe that the first thing to crush them, to crush the backward politics, is to demonize their icons, to demonize their slogans, to just say that Pichhadon ka Raj is all Gunda Raj. I even tweeted that. And, Agdon ka Raj is all, wo Mangal Raj hai aur wo Ram Raj hai. So this is the narrative, this is part of the narrative. I would say out of that 15 years, the last 5 years of Lalu Yadav, which was actually Rabdi Raj, that was something that we can say something closer to Jungle Raj. So I think Tejashwi is very mindful of the fact that this is the kind of baggage that he carries. This is something that he has to run away from. If you would have noticed, there are no pictures, no hoardings, no discussion of Lalu Yadav at all. In fact, I would say it is not Tejashwi who is asking for votes in the name of Lalu Yadav. It is actually the BJP, Narendra Modi and Nitish Kumar, who are asking for votes against Lalu Yadav. So you can say Lalu is a bhoot, he's a ghost. He's there and he's not there. So there can be no politics without Lalu Yadav in Bihar. Rest assured. So I think he is a transformed man from what I saw last year. Last year also, Lok Sabha election, I interviewed him. As an interviewer who has interviewed maybe hundreds of politicians in the last 20 years, he was a completely transformed politician. Last interview, I would have given him maybe 4 out of 10. And in this interview, I asked him very tricky questions like on Lalu Yadav, like on social justice, things that he's trying to run away from. Itna smartly us bande ne jawab diya. And I would give him maybe 9.5 out of 10. He was very good. He was brave. He knew his what he was talking about. There's clarity in the messaging. And that, I think, is one of the reasons of his success. Messaging is clear. Or messaging pahunchane ka tarika is very clear. So, suppose today I know what Tejashwi Yadav's election plan is.
So, Manisha, Mehraj, you guys want to weigh in, and what is your view of what you have been reading? Are you also afflicted by the upper caste bias?
And by the way, I'm sorry, I'm saying this, someone who is an upper caste person. So I'm saying that this.
I don't think there's any doubt about that existing. But I think there's more than a couple of issues on that. But I just want to come back after Manisha and Mehraj have spoken on that entire family feud that's resolved with Misa and the other brother. What's his name? Tej Pratap. So, but yeah, Manisha, what is your view of what you have been reading and observing and speaking to your friends who I'm sure also on the ground there?
Yeah, and our reporters also on the ground. But it is true that I've been watching a lot of Maria Shakil, who's been on the ground, and it's true that when she's going around talking to people, in fact, there was one very interesting bite where she brought on the Jungle Raj. There were 3 morning walkers and they were like, koi development nahi hua hai, aur ab to yuva ki leher chal rahi hai, which is to indicate ki Tejaswi. Now, either they were really hardcore RJD supporters or they were genuine voters who were fed up with Nitish's whatever rule, but she brought on Jungle Raj. She said कि पर लालू के टाइम पे जो था हम थे यहाँ पे और कितना कठिन था महिलाओं के लिए घूमना and all, and they kind of negated it and said that ये propaganda फैलाया गया है कि सब कुछ ही जंगल राज था, ऐसा नहीं है कि पूरा जंगल राज था. However, I have had friends who've lived in Lalu's Bihar. It was no great paradise of social justice for a lot of people. I mean, there's no doubt that there was gundaism, criminal activities, attacks on journalists. So, I mean, I guess it's somewhere in the middle. If you really want to assess someone's legacy, I guess you have to look at the whole 15 years. But as far as Bihar elections is concerned, I will just wait and observe on what happens on the final day. I really can't say anything about it because you know what happened the last time where all journalists and were, talking about how Nitish has been taught a lesson and then he won.
Well,
and that famous NDTV incident where Shekhar Gupta and Pranay were talking about how, Nitish had been taught a lesson for the first 1 hour, and then the next 1 hour they were explaining why he came back to power. So I would just want to observe.
Nitish is a wily guy. He can go anywhere. You never know. I mean, in him, Amit Shah has found his match.
Also, Manisha, Abhinandan, I did a show. It's so intriguing because I wasn't there in Bihar, of course, 15 years ago. So I don't have a lived experience of Jungle Raj. I mean, I've read things during my PhD thesis and also, as an inquisitive person, curious journalist. But so I conducted a whole debate on this issue, whether this was a Jungle Raj or not. And I got Dalit professors to talk about, I got upper caste editors to talk about who have established this entire theory of Jungle Raj. I would advise, if this doesn't come under self-promotion, but I would advise your viewers, your audience to look at this debate. It's a half an hour long debate, very fascinating debate this was, where this Dalit professor says, when I ask him, what is the difference? Why it is called a Jungle Raj? So he says, पहले दलितों को एक लाठी एक डंडे से हाँक लिया करते थे कि सब लोग भाग जाओ. आज उन्हें गांव के अंदर भगाने के लिए गोली चलानी पड़ती है. So which means what he was trying to say is that this was the assertion of backward people. And he said people only talk about, from 90 to 2005, they do not talk about what it was like before the 90s. Like, what Lalu Yadav was trying to demolish was so ugly. His struggle could not have been pretty.
Peaceful.
So what he was trying to
also that time, I remember the Ranveer Sena and all were very active in Bihar at that time. But
But isn't it true, Arfa, that what ultimately led to was consolidation of Yadavs and emergence of Yadavs as the dominant caste, and OBC politics is the dominant, and Dalits still had to bear the brunt of oppression from OBCs
True.
and Yadavs.
True.
Yadavs
So
specifically.
it's a mixed story. As you said, it's somewhere in between, Manisha.
Exactly. There are many truths which are not necessarily, contradicting each other. This is also true and this is also true.
And also brother-in-laws of Lalu Yadav, they run amok and the kind of hooliganism.
Shahabuddin crime syndicate.
Yes.
That was, but yes, I guess like 15 years is so long. It can't be one thing actually.
Absolutely not. But Mehraj, you want to come in?
Just a couple of points. I mean, like Arfa also pointed out, it was no heaven before Lalu came, right? I mean, if you remember, just before he came to power, there was the Bhagalpur massacre, the pogrom. It's another matter that he didn't do much about it later, but that's another matter. And this, what Arfa was talking about, this sort of upper caste bias, which makes all the people who are not part of the club into these villains and launders the reputations of people who are really, really vile. Just the other day, the print published an article, a profile of Tejashwi Surya, that Hyderabad BJP person. I mean, he's as vile, as bigoted a person as there can be. And the way that profile was, it was like he was this like God-given new leader of BJP.
I just want to add to the Tejaswi thing, like fiery speaker. He's not fiery. He's a bigoted guy. I mean, a lot of things that he says are pure outright.
The only thing is his delivery is fluent and stutter-free. So I think if you can manage to do that, you're a fiery speaker and you can pepper it with some bigotry.
So was Advani, so was Vajpayee. And the same thing happened with them also. They, over some massacres, they were as bigoted as anybody else. I mean, Advani literally has blood on his hands in Vajpayee, and they were laundered as these great statesmen all of a sudden. Same thing even happened recently with Yogi Adityanath when he came to power, or gave him a chance. He's a great guy. He's this person. That even now, when all this is happening, now it can't be hidden anymore. What is happening in UP? Even now, you have people like trying to build him up as he's this great reformer, and he can't control this mafia. He can't control this mafia. But if it's a person from a marginalized caste who's a leader, the narrative is completely different. And God forbid he is a Muslim, look at Owaisi, how he is being covered. He is, just because he wears topi and he is a Muslim name and has a dadi, he is always projected as this kind of Islamist extremist who is always out to hurt the secular cause. He is the BJP's B team. He is this and that and everybody.
Like Abhinandan, I'll give you an example that women's safety was an issue. Even Maria said in her video, I saw that video, and that's true. But, when I was talking to these people from Yadav community, they said that people used to say कि शाम के बाद औरतों का निकलना ठीक नहीं है. They said for backward women, for Dalit women, दिन में उठा के ले जाया करते थे 90s से पहले. So you are only talking about that all women were unsafe during Lalu, but before Lalu, only particular women from particular background were so unsafe that you didn't even need to kind of wait for the sunset or wait for the policeman to go away. You would do it in their presence. And there used to be customs like women from the lower caste groups, when they will be married, they will be first go to Thakur Sahabs ke paas jaake, then they will go to their family. We've had films made on these subjects. So this is something we can't really say that if that was not Jungle Raj. And in fact, I would argue what we are experiencing in the last 5-6 years, Abhinandan, is that not Jungle Raj? Is this what's happening in Uttar Pradesh? Is that not Jungle Raj?
I think that it's interesting because I think there are several realities here. But the one thing that I actually probably disagree with both you and Mehraj is that everyone is the same, because that is a classic right-wing trope that, Obama is the same as Trump, or Akhilesh is as good or bad as Yogi Adityanath, because look at the statistics, look at the data. And I have had enough people who have made this case. So I, for one, would not say Atal and Yogi are the same. Yes, Atal, there is that one speech, it's on YouTube, where he has said, Zameen samtal karni padegi, whatever it is, and he oversaw something, and does have his roots in RSS. But the moment we say everyone is the same, then one is doing exactly what extremes from all sides want. Now, while I do admit that I'm sure Bihar was no land of milk and honey before Lalu, I have met Lalu. I have interviewed him as a reporter back in the 90s when he was like, everybody wanted Lalu because he would call someone onto the stage and, garland him. He used to break convention. He was not this unapproachable neta. But when you spoke to him, the way he spoke, he scared you. Now, one can say Obama bombed Iraq and Afghanistan as much as Bush, but I don't think they're the same because it's like saying that, is there data to suggest that women have been grabbed more by the pussy after Trump said that? No, maybe there's no data. But how a leader conducts him or herself matters. And the way Lalu used to talk, "Arey hum ye kar denge, arey kaun rokega?" And I've seen him talk like that. And maybe Kamal Nath didn't talk like that, and maybe he was as corrupt. But I think to completely absolve leaders just because they're from a backward caste of their utterances or how the optics of their utterances play out, I think is a disservice to governance and to the caste equation. I don't think one can say this is okay because they were bad. Because if Rajiv Gandhi is suave enough to come across as clean, maybe he was doing dirty stuff, it makes a difference. Optics matter. And that is a separate, I think, set in itself. So and that is why I thought Kanshiram was a way more effective leader for the Dalits than Chandrasekhar will ever be. Because when you spoke to Kanshiram, he came across as a man with a plan. He knew what he was saying. He said that right now it's anarchy for us. I want to make it like this. He had that pen thing he used to keep doing. And I get that anarchy for everybody is as good or bad as anarchy for one bit. But I don't think, someone like Chandrasekhar, and not because of any other reason, will have the stature of a Kanshiram, because you can never be that effective if you're not that good in at least the dream you're selling. That's my view. Arfa, what do you think?
No, Abhinandan, I would say, I think I partially agree with you. I would never say that Yogi and Vajpayee are the same, for the fact that they both, like their end game and end plan may be the same. They want to turn India into a Hindu Rashtra, both Yogi Adityanath and both Vajpayee. Vajpayee had a coalition government, so he couldn't have been like that. He wanted to be this very acceptable face. Now Yogi doesn't need to project himself as acceptable. His politics is anti-Muslim politics. Vajpayee's politics, at least the optics, was not, because he was very much a part of a coalition government. So I would say rather, when we look back in history, whether it's Lalu Prasad Yadav or Atal Bihari Vajpayee or anybody, we have to also look at the times that they lived in and the politics of that time. So what Lalu Yadav stood for, how he is remembered now, is also, we cannot remove him from the time and age that he lived in, and the politics that was before Lalu and what he did to Indian politics. So I'm not saying that we can really, all these kidnapping, violence, hooliganism, all of that, we can never justify, even if this is done by backward people or forward people. All I'm trying to say is, when we draw parallels, when Narendra Modi now says in election rallies that hum us jungle raj ke yuvraj ko aap elect kar rahe hain, we should remind him that what we are living right now, we don't have a memory of 15 years ago, maybe 18-year-old voter who will be voting for the first time would have been 3-year-old, and he would have zero memory of what Lalu Yadav was like. But we do have a memory of what we have lived in the last 6 years. And also, Abhinandan, I think we should also remind our audience that, at different points in time, the victim of that particular politics would be different. So maybe Lalu Yadav's politics was in favor of backward people and for upper caste and for, politically entitled people. Even equality, they feel, is oppression, because they're so used to privilege. They are so used to preferential treatment that for them, equality, even just being equal with backward people, would be oppression. And that's why they call Lalu Yadav's rule as oppressive, because it came about as something that, Thakur ka vote or Dalit ka vote, Yadav ka vote or Brahman ka vote would be equal, which actually is the promise of Indian constitution.
Does the Ranveer Sena still exist, or is it spent force? It's done.
It has, it has changed shape. It is still there, but maybe the time is not right for them.
Just in case you're wondering, Ranveer Sena was the high caste, I think, Bayana Thakur force, which used to kind of take badla against the lower caste because they had become so.
Imagine the caste wars we had. So we should not really, and also we should maybe, how I look at history. I look at history through the victim of that politics. Like if I want to remember the 6 years of Narendra Modi's rule, I would ask Muslims how they felt during the 6 years. I wouldn't ask Brahmins how they felt during Narendra Modi's rule, because they are the victim of his politics. So if I have to ask before 90s, before Lalu, I would certainly ask how it was like, whether it was Jungle Raj or not. I'm going to ask Dalits and backward people. So this is my way. Maybe you may look at it differently, but this is my way of looking at it.
And that is a good way. I think that's a good.
This is an important point. I mean, when coming back to what you were saying earlier about optics matters. Optics matters to who? Does it matter to a Muslim person that whether he is being demonized and killed by Vajpayee or Yogi? Does it matter to an Iraqi whether he is being bombed by Trump or Obama? Obama makes a great speech. Trump is a loudmouth bigot. But it matters to the people who are in power, who aren't affected by those optics, who aren't directly affected. So they concentrate on these optics. For the person, for the victim, how does it matter whether he's being bombed by Obama or Trump, whether he's being killed by Vajpayee or Yogi Adityanath? And here is where the problem is. I mean, the reputations have been laundered to such an extent. When you spoke about Vajpayee, you only talked about that one speech. Vajpayee was also indicted for the Nelly massacre. Vajpayee was also, have we forgotten that he was prime minister in 2002? The ultimate responsibility for Gujarat riots rests on him. Because he was the person who could have removed Vajpayee. He chose not to, because for him, that principle, yes. So have we forgotten that also? Have we forgotten that he was a member of the leading light of the Ayodhya movement? Why does that not fall on him? Because his reputation has been laundered. After he came to power, he was turned into this great statesman, great orator, who says all the nice things. But look at the record.
But that's not all that there is. Again, that's one side. I mean, he did make a peaceful overture to Pakistan, which I don't think any other BJP leader will ever do. Modi will definitely not. He did resume a bus service with great amount of success, and I happened to see it. So there is that too. So I think Vajpayee and Yogi are not the same, because you could say because it's coalition or because it is different generation or values change over the years and we are in the age of bigotry. But governance at a macro level is always going to be complicated. I don't think there's any doubt about that, which is why I think nuance is a little more important when it comes to leadership and governance than, dealing with regular people like you and me.
Very true. And that's why I'm saying that it depends on who you ask. Whether Vajpayee was a statesman or he was a communal bigot, that depends on who you ask, right? But because the narrative in this country is built by the upper caste people who are in the media, who are in the politics and everywhere, so you only get to see that one side of the equation. You don't listen to the other side, and that's a problem.
Yeah, Abhinandan, quickly, but just one thing. So I'm saying, I was reading, I think this was Amartya Sen or someone else, and who said, and this is very, I think it fits what we are talking about right now, that India, for that matter, it's different to different people. If you hear 7 people, they will tell you 7 different stories, and all those 7 stories are true.
Whatever that हाथी वाला कार्टून बनता था ना,
एक्चुअली वही है, वो हाथी है,
हाथी वो दूरदर्शन पे ब्लैक एंड व्हाइट में आता था.
तो आपके हाथ पूंछ लगेगी तो आपको लगेगा भारत पूंछ है, मेरे हाथ दांत लगेगा तो मुझे लगेगा भारत दांत है.
This is also a structural problem. I mean, this is the way the media is organized in this country, the way it's owned by who owns it, who runs it, how politics is operated. So these are structural problems. I mean, narratives don't just build by themselves. They're built, they're created
by individuals, and where those individuals come and their life experience matters.
Precisely.
Manisha?
I would agree that I don't think there's really such a drastic comparison that you can make between Yogi and Vajpayee. And I think even minorities in this country would, at least if you read from the op-eds and all, there is a distinction that people will draw between Vajpayee and Modi and Yogi, and also Modi. There's no denying that Vajpayee was a Hindutva politician. His ideology was Hindutva. So to that effect, he did rally for a Ram temple. He did say that Hindus needed their own, temple in the land of Lord Ram's birth and all that. But he didn't give speeches in the way that, Yogi sat next to a guy who literally said that, you should take out women from their grave and rape them. And he was sitting there, aram se apne nakhun kaat raha tha, jo bhi kar raha tha. Vajpayee was not that sort of a guy, but of course he was a Hindutva politician. So he did, but to say that, I would say that even Hindutva politics has shades like any other, politics.
Vajpayee didn't have to make those bigoted state speeches because Advani was doing it for him.
But even Advani didn't make the kind of speeches that Yogi did.
Exactly. Now somebody else is doing it for somebody else. Until 5 years ago, it was Modi doing it. Now he doesn't need to. Somebody else is doing it.
Tejashwi is same as Vajpayee is same as. I think Hindutva politics is a huge umbrella. Within that, also there are shades, and it's a reality of India. This has been around from the 1940s. So even before Vajpayee and before Atal Bihari Vajpayee, there was a Hindu Mahasabha saying things.
That goes without saying. Because these are different individuals, they'll be different. But if you have to really look at who they are, you have to look at their work, at their record, not what they said.
Coming back to Bihar, Arfa is coming to you. Also, if you could tell me about, remember there was some Misa wanted to be the primary legacy carrier forward of their politics, and then Tejashwi. How did that family drama play out?
Yeah, so this is also very tactfully, he's kind of silenced everybody in the family for the greater good, for the greater higher purpose. That look, let me become the chief minister and everything will be good afterwards. I think this has been one of his biggest achievements, to set his house in order before he stepped out, to ask for votes from people. So we'll have to give it to Tejashwi. Also, I wanted to tell you that suppose what Lalu Yadav did in the 90s and his son 30 years from now, his politics is completely different. I'm saying the ground on which he's standing was built by Lalu Yadav. At that point in time, before the 90s, Lalu Yadav had to do a politics which was representative of his time, what he was fighting. Now, since Lalu Yadav has done all of that for Tejashwi, we cannot even imagine. I have people telling us that, Tejashwi will be acceptable if he comes minus Lalu Yadav.
Wow.
This is again a very upper caste narrative, that if you talk like us, if you do not hurt our interest, if you do not have a sense of contempt for us, if you do not talk about the injustices of the past, if you do not talk about reservation, if you do not talk about privatization, if you do not talk about Modi's saffron politics, divisive politics, if you also keep the dari topis behind the stage, then you will be acceptable to us. So basically what we are talking about is that after all, it's going to be the politics of Hindu supremacy that's going to be in the foreground. Now, the carrier of that politics can be Narendra Modi, who's an OBC, can be a Tejashwi Yadav, who is a Yadav and OBC. So as long as the objective of the ideology is achieved, anybody can do it. And Abhinandan is as good as an Arfa Khanum Sherwani, as long as you are implementing Manusmriti, as long as you are killing constitution, as long as you are not talking about the interest and of the marginalized people and equality and freedom. So I think if Tejaswi is to forget everything that his politics stands for, I do not see a difference between electing a Tejaswi Yadav or a Nitish Kumar. And that's what I was trying to, also tell you, that there is this resentment amongst people who believe in the politics of social justice, that Tejaswi Yadav is again trying to project himself, or maybe his advisors are telling him, oh, look, we have already achieved social justice, so now this is time for economic justice. Politics which is not based on identity. So you are doing vikas, you are doing economic justice, but to whom? Kiska vikas? I want to ask Abhinandan ka vikas, Mehraj ka vikas, kiska vikas?
There's a sense of the dominant narrative of the dynamic caste dynamic would not be disturbed too much. So that is basically the ether in which politics should swim.
Maybe having a Tejasvi to say whatever Lalu Yadav did was Jungle Raj. I am sorry for all whatever Lalu Yadav.
That would be almost as ironic as a recent arrest, which we shall talk about. But before that, I had a couple of...
One last thing I wanted to add on the Lalu Prasad thing, because we were talking about Lalu Prasad, is the speeches he gave during the Ram Temple movement. I don't think any leader today can tackle BJP the way he did. He just took them head on. The speeches he made in favor of secularism and in favor of, him and even the CPIM leader.
On secularism, Lalu, on a lot of other stuff, he can be faulted, but on that, he has been unwavering. In fact, even during the UPA time, when the Digvijay doing that against Uma Bharti, doing that little soft Hindutva thing and, whatever you want to call it, on this, his messaging was so clear and devoid of any political kind of calculations that it was even more clear than the Congress has ever been. And it has been clear since Lalu's been a political figure, I think.
And Abhinandan, you remember that since Manisha is speaking of the speeches, when he said कि सब लोग जब मर जाएंगे, जब इंसान ही मर जाएगा तो मंदिर में घंटा कौन बजाएगा? You remember telling, that was really a very famous speech. So that's what I'm saying. जब आपको जंगल राज पूछना है तो बिहार के मुसलमानों से पूछिए, दलितों से पूछिए, यादवों से पूछिए कि वो जंगल राज था या नहीं. And this Dalit professor was also saying कि जंगल राज का मतलब होता है कि जो सवर्ण स्ट्रक्चर है पूरा, जो सवर्ण संरचना है, उसका ढह जाना is जंगल राज. This is what Manusmriti says. And he begins his answer by saying that a woman driving a Mercedes is actually Jangal Raj. A Dalit having a mustache is Jangal Raj. And there was another Muslim professor and who said कि उसने पूछा कि लालू यादव में क्या फर्क है और अब में, तो said कि देखिए मेरा खोका है ये, लालू यादव के टाइम पे मेरा खोका नहीं जलाया जाता था. Only this much.
You have to look at people's words rather than the words. I mean, for all that Lalu did, when it came to prosecuting the accused of the Bhagalpur riots, he let them off, basically.
Right. So we have a reporter in Bihar, our young Basant, who has been sending us several reports and interviews. And in fact, he's kept our editors quite busy, which is a fantastic thing. He has been extremely productive while he's been there. And I'd like to thank all of you who contribute to the NL Sena project. The project is still up. Our target was 5,40,000. We are approximately at 4,10,000. We're still about 1,30,000 short. So if you haven't already contributed to the NL Sena Bihar election project, please do, because we really want to keep him there for a month and make sure that he can cover as much ground as possible so that we have more ground reports and less opinion pieces that other portals depend on, because those are traffic drivers and not necessarily subscription drivers. So thank you so much. We've raised almost, I think, 70% of as much as we needed. And if you could top it up, then we could make sure that we don't have to cut any corners in making sure that our reporter is well taken care of while he's there. And also a couple of announcements about a new website. Some of you can't seem to find the new podcast player. It's on the top right-hand corner of the website. You can also go to the menu and click on podcast. But if you want to go to a single click shortcut, there's a mic on the top right corner. So you click on the mic icon on the homepage, and the experience is as good as any major podcast platform. We are very proud and happy with what Chitranshu and Nishan have been able to create. It's fantastic. So many of you have been missing the player. I repeat, click on the mic icon on the top of our homepage. Also, we'll be putting the Hafta behind the paywall soon. It has been outside the paywall for a long time. It's been free. So we are keeping it free for a few weeks longer so you can get familiar with our podcast player and how to navigate around that. After you're familiar with it, we'll be pulling it behind the paywall. So once all these issues are resolved, it'll go behind the paywall. So do use the next few weeks to familiarize yourself on our podcast player. So you'll have Daily Dose, Awful and Awesome, and Hafta, all our podcasts. Our podcast player includes download option. It includes speed control. You can queue up podcasts. Let's say you want to listen to Hafta episode 301, then you want to listen to Awful and Awesome, then you want to listen to Reporters Without Borders. You can create a queue. You can skip on specific topics. So now, Haftas come with topics like we're talking about Bihar, then we're talking about Arnab, then we're talking about what happened in Austria and France. You can skip to any of those specific sections. And if you're still a Mufatkhor, this is the best time to subscribe because we have a fantastic Diwali se Christmas tak offer where you can gift a subscription and fantastic swag with a nice, beautiful scented candle. And of course, you have a Tiranga soap, Sabki Dhulai soap of Newslaundry. So you get that with your subscription. So this is the best time to subscribe. So I repeat, please go to newslaundry.com on the subscription page and on the NL Sena page and contribute and pay to keep news free because without you, we cannot survive because we don't take any ads, as you know. After that long plug, Manisha, can you please give us the many parallel stories playing out in this whole Arnab case? There are many cases that have been filed. What is the case he's been arrested for? And of course, after that, the line that was people were standing in to condemn his arrest from our cabinet.
Yeah. So this current case, I'll speak of a current case that he's been arrested for, Arnab Goswami. This pertains to an interior designer called Anvay Nayak. He and his mother, Kumud Nayak, were found dead in Alibag in 2018. The police back then came to the conclusion that Anvay strangulated his mother and then he hung himself. And this was because of debt issues that he was facing. Now he'd left a suicide note where he said that he's, suffering severe debt issues and he's taken this extreme step because of non-payment of dues by 3 companies, one of which is Republic TV. The other one was this company owned by this guy called Firoz Sheikh, I think it was iCast X or something like that. And another guy called Nitish Sarda. So these were his allegations. I think Arnab's company, Republic TV, owed him about 83 lakh for interior designing that they'd done for the new office. Police investigated it back then, and I think in 2019, somewhere in the beginning of 2019, they closed the case and said it found no proof. This case was then reopened this year after Arnab Goswami had gone on his whole Palghar tirade against the Maharashtra government. So all 3 people, the 2 other people also charged in this case have been arrested. Arnab has also been arrested and he's been sent to judicial custody. I think there's going to be his bail hearing today. So this is pertaining to the particular case for which he's been arrested, and it has got nothing to do with the TRP scam or the other criminal charges against him that the Mumbai police had also filed an FIR for in Palghar.
But you did mention that this case was closed under Fadnavis, right?
It was closed under a BJP government.
Yes, so under Fadnavis.
Citing that there's no proof.
There was a closure report. Now they have reopened that case. So that is what happened. After that, everyone from Amit Shah to Mr. Nadda to Smriti Irani and to many other cabinet ministers who you would not know the names of, like even I didn't. You'd known them by face. There's so many.
In fact, this is probably the first case when after a journalist's arrest, only politicians have come out unequivocally in his support.
Javadekar, everyone, the whole cabinet has come. So there are many things happening here. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Is this like because of this, Smriti had to answer a lot of questions that people put on Twitter that, hello, X happened, Y happened, So there was that.
So it's deeply divided the media fraternity also, while NBSA, Editors Guild and all have issued unconditional support. There's the Maharashtra press body, which has said that this case has nothing to do with press freedom. It's an abetment to suicide case. It's a criminal case, and journalists aren't above holding to account for criminal activities. For example, when Tejpal got arrested, it wasn't a freedom of speech issue. It was because he was accused of a crime.
Now, I'd like to know the panel's views because this is not a simple yes or no, good or bad kind of scene. It's a little more complicated, at least in my view. You guys can let me know what you think. But the one thing also is there was a 12-minute video of when the police went to arrest him. The police waited outside his house for about an hour. Then they went inside, and if you've seen the video, he sat down, he wasn't moving. He says, I won't go, call my doctor, I'm not feeling well, my arm is. Then his wife and child were also there. His son is at 19 or 20 years old. And the wife was given a paper to sign, which I think she tore up, or she was flinging the paper and she was getting in the way of the lady police.
And he keeps claiming that you've assaulted me, but I have not seen assault in that video. I see police officers holding him by hand and trying to make him get up, but
there were some lacerations on his arm which he showed, but I got a more severe injury than that when Manisha kicked me while shooting nuisance punts. You were supposed to kick me, but I was doing a practice handstand, and before I had even done my practice, you kicked me and I landed and I was bruised on my hip. But I didn't flash it outside and see how battered I am.
Arm injury he's had for a while. He comes on debates with the bandaged arm.
But anyway, the point is that before I would like the panel to explore this in as honest and nuanced a way as possible, because I know there's not one thing. I just want to play this one clip of Arnab while he was conducting a debate on an issue like he does often. Here's what it sounds like.
I don't care. I don't care. I don't give a damn for the due process of law. And I know many of you think I should not say this. They will say, oh, again, Arnab has broken quote unquote journalistic ethics. I don't give a damn for those journalistic ethics then.
Here he's talking about some rapists that were gunned down. I don't give a damn about the due process of law. Due process of law can go to hell. And that's not the only time. There's one I can play 20 clips like this. No, now in this context, in this backdrop, Mehraj, why don't you go first? What are the various aspects do you think it kind of unveils, kind of reveals about governance, law and order, journalism, or lack of it?
I mean, even if he doesn't give a damn about the rule of law, we should. I mean, that's what makes a society civilized, right? If you don't care about the and the whole point of freedom of speech is you uphold it even for people who may, I mean, in your opinion, might not even deserve it. But that said, this is not even a freedom of speech issue to begin with, unlike what has been made out to be. This is a criminal case. He's been arrested for a criminal case. Whether that case is genuine or not, that's a different matter. If it's a genuine or not, that the court will decide. And I mean, I am not one to trust the police. And I'm not one to trust the journalists either. So there's a bit of a quandary here, because the police, the way they behave in this country, the way they're used as political pawns, and even on their own, the atrocious behavior they have shown all over the country. So, I mean, I would be very reluctant to just say, okay, they're right in this case, the case is genuine or whatever. But that aside, how the case is, whether it's right or not, this is not a freedom of speech issue. He is not been hauled up for his journalistic work, however that is. He has been taken in for a criminal, like Manisha also pointed out, like was the case with Tejashwi, for example. So if you are saying that police shouldn't touch Arnab Goswami because he's a journalist, no matter what crime he committed, what exactly are you saying? That freedom of speech covers crime also? But clearly not.
But I mean, we all know that how policing or putting you in your place works is not by getting you on what they want to get you on. It is by finding a case, like we said, if they want you in, they can have you in for having more than 5 liters of whiskey in your house.
That's precisely what I started with, right? I mean, you can't trust the police. Nobody in their right mind would trust the police.
But did you feel any pressure, Mehraj, that I know I don't, because I'm pretty clear on where I stand on this, but I know many journalists, purely because of where are the freedom of speech upholders now, felt the need to tweet very long explainers why they stand up for Arnab or not. Did you feel any such pressure, or you don't really give a rat's ass?
Mehraj doesn't feel the pressure to tweet as such.
Yeah. That's a blessing.
Good. That's why he remains the most sane out of all of us. He's a voice of sanity. Manisha?
So I have a lot of things to say on it. Can I have your permission of some time?
Feel free. And after that, Arfa, you can make a list of what you want to say, because I know it's going to be a long one.
It's a very, as everything that involves Arnab Goswami, it's a very complicated issue. And I think there's really something that all of us have to really think about. One is what Mehraj said. I'm a little wary of taking that line, because this is the same thing that right wing can say when it comes to NDTV. Ki bhai, they're not being jailed for their journalism. It's a banking fraud case, There was these transactions that are murky. So, it's fine to send the ED, CBI and everyone after Pranay Roy, because it is usually at the surface of it, never an FOE issue, right? It's always some transactions in the bank, some property, some utterances. I mean, to me, it's very clear that even if there is a case here, Mumbai police has purely opened it up because of what he at the government's instructions because of how he went after Palghar. And it happened immediately after that. And that's the sad part, right? That even if this case needed to be investigated, suppose Arnab was sucking up to Shiv Sena, and suppose he was, all pally with the Maharashtra government, even if this case deserved an investigation, it would have never gotten it. And that's really sad about the police being completely a political tool. And I have no doubt here that the Maharashtra police is a political tool. Secondly, when it comes to civil liberties, Arnab Goswami has played an exemplary role in lowering the bar. And this is not just about political issues, but, starting from Talwars to Sarabjit Singh, Shashi Tharoor, JNU students, Shaheen Bagh protesters, Sudha Bhardwaj, Riya. He has time and again, through his debates, rallied for them to be locked up. He's asked for them to be jailed, and his assertions are backed with zero investigative journalism. It's not like when journalists reported on the Manu Sharma case, found solid evidence and said, reopen it and let justice prevail. It's never like that in his case. It's just, lock them up because they said this and why are they roaming free? So he's harangued journalists. He's harangued people in their own community. He's gone after NDTV. He's never had a nice thing to say about any journalist, print, Indian Express, sabke bare mein sabko gal jata hai. He's, for scores of cases against journalists all over states who've been, slapped with sedition. Recently, the Malayalam journalist Siddiqui Kappan, he's never stood up for anyone. So I think this expectation for objective, unequivocal condemnation for someone who's made a career out of motivated hounding of people, it's a bit much. So I for one, I'm not going to say ki chalo sab unequivocally condemn karo, because he has really victimized a lot of people. Even so, I think most journalists, and I read today's newspapers, most of the editorials put out a really balanced view on it. And I'd agree most with the Indian Express's editorial where they said that, he's a political agent, Arnab. So when you compare him, you can't compare him to, say, a Supriya Sharma who was slapped with an FIR in Uttar Pradesh for reporting. Or you can't compare him to even Pratik, our own reporter, who's been harassed by, the Pune police and by Sakal Times, that is owned by the Pawars. He's being harassed for them because he did a journalistic story. Arnab is being harassed because he's a political player. So it's a proxy war between Arnab and Mumbai police. Mumbai police is the tool for Shiv Sena, Arnab is the tool for BJP. So I would not even bring in, issues of, what he reported on. But I think the simple thing to do here is, I think all of us should be asking Mumbai police, what new evidence do you have? What is it that suddenly changed in this case that from a closure report, now you've arrested all three of them? And, there better be some real reason for them to have done this. And they could have actually also summoned him. They didn't need to do this dramatic thing of going to his house and picking him up. That was obviously done to show him his place. But finally, I'd say that in terms of statements being issued, I would not simply say that, you must not penalize journalists for doing journalism in this case, because there's no journalism to begin with. There was never any journalism that Arnab did in the SSR case. He's been slandering everyone from Bollywood people to police to, Thakres, and, calling his son baby penguin and stuff like that, insinuating he was at a party and that he had something to do with murder, quote unquote. That's just
I was a Pakistani agent on one of his shows because of a tweet I put. Yeah. He said he put my tweet there, and he and some of my former colleagues were sitting there and saying, this is the Pakistani narrative that these Pakistani agents are putting here.
But I would say that even if Maharashtra police and Maharashtra government have good grounds here to take Arnab to court for slander, take him court for slander. Don't use your state police to criminalize him, put him in jail for something, completely dusra case. Fight this head on. What you're fighting is essentially slander, right? Misinformation. So fight it head on, saying that this was slander, that you can't be calling Maharashtra police corrupt, or you can't say that we are part of a murder. You can't say that, Aditya Thackeray is part of a murder. Take him to court. File a civil suit.
Arfa?
I think whatever Manisha has said, I don't think anybody can add to it. Totally 100% agree with her point of view. Something more I want to say is that if people are calling it political vendetta, and if we are to believe it is one. So he is a politician. What he is doing is politics. It's not journalism. So maybe I would stand up for Arnab Goswami as much as I would stand up for a politician. I do not. I find it an insult to be in the same line, the same breath. His and my name should be taken that we both are journalists. If what Arnab Goswami does is journalism, I will leave. I quit journalism today, if this is what journalism is. So first of all, I feel zero pressure, as you asked Mehraj, zero pressure to stand up for, say, the principles of free speech, for free media, for democracy. But as Manisha said, I would also would like the government or any affected party, not just the government, any affected party, be it the intellectuals, who were hounded and demonized, be it the Jamatis or the Dalits or the missionaries, everybody and anybody who has been a victim of his journalism, to stand up and file case and find their records in the court, in the institution of the court. So again, I wouldn't really, like, they were silent. The government was silent for the last 11 months that they have been in power. So all of a sudden, what was new that they received? And even if, as Manisha said, even if there is merit in the case, in this case, it is suspicious then. So I would say when this man is, spreading hatred, communal disharmony, displeasure, he is a threat to nation. So he should be dragged to court. Cases should be filed against him for his, hatred, for propaganda,
and an outright fake news. I mean, not even, forget spin. Spin तो होता है ना, आप एक fact को लेके spin करो, आप fact ही अपना ही पेल देते हो.
अपना पेल देते हैं. और दूसरे एक सबसे खास बात, for inciting mob violence on vulnerable people of India. This is not just a crime, but it is a crime against humanity that this man is committing. So I wouldn't really call it that. In this case, it's, I think, would be उसको बहुत सस्ते में छोड़ देना होगा if ये abetment to suicide वाले case में जाना चाहिए. Because I really want a stop to what this man does. How this will be done? Yesterday I had a debate with Siddharth. Siddharth was again taking a pro Arnab, like हम अपने उसूलों के गुलाम हैं type stand. Siddharth Vadrajan, I was like, no, I find it insulting.
Arfa, let me see. You said, तुम्हारे उसूल, तुम्हारे आदर्श, क्या दिया है तुम्हारे उसूल, तुम्हारे आदर्श ने? एक बीट, एक क्वार्टर, 2 रोटी और एक यूनिफॉर्म. देखो मेरे पास क्या है? मेरे पास वायर है, मेरे पास Section 8 कंपनी है. Sorry, Sid, if you listen to this. Sorry for making you Shashi Kapoor while Arfa remains Amitabh Bachchan.
But one thing I totally agreed with him on was that we do not want this fight of fake news, of hatred, to be fought by Maharashtra government or any government. So we cannot leave it to politicians and their liking and disliking कि वो हमें बचाएंगे, वो पत्रकारिता को बचाएंगे या वो hatred को.
Yeah, they are not. That is not their agenda.
So I think this is one point that I totally agree with him on this. And he also said that you can actually jail one Arnab Goswami. What will you do to, say, Sudhir Chaudhary? What would you do to, what is the name of the other guy? Sardana, and also, other people. So what are you going to do to those people? So you cannot really, so this whole idea has to be fought head on, as Manisha said. But I feel very strongly that I feel zero pressure to do this, okay, whatever, taking this moral high ground, saying, oh, हम तो liberal हैं, हम सबके लिए बोलेंगे, इनके लिए भी बोलेंगे. मैं अपने उसूलों की गुलाम हूँ, लेकिन इस मामले में ये उसूलों की लड़ाई नहीं है. I want to tell this to Siddharth Vadrajan and all liberals out there on Twitter कि ये लड़ाई उसूलों की है ही नहीं.
Just a couple of quick points I'd like to make.
Yes, please.
I mean, this is the tragedy of this whole matter. See, Arnab, for I think more than a decade now, Sardana, the rest of them, they have been inciting violence. They have been demonizing Muslims and others, dissidents, political dissidents. But like Manisha was saying, the Maharashtra government would take them to court for slandering them, right? For the ordinary Muslim, for the ordinary Dalit, ordinary political dissident who they have demonized, who they have even incited violence against, they don't have the power. In a civilized country, in a civilized society, the state is supposed to stand up for them and take these guys on their behalf. That's not going to happen in this country, whether it's Shiv Sena or whoever it is. So we are at a pass here, right? And then if there is a person like, say, Sudhir or others who are not like Arnab, who haven't gone after Shiv Sena or somebody else, who is going to take them on? And in their instance, Sudhir, all these people, if the state is not going to take them on, the other option was for the press to have some self-regulatory mechanism to kind of take this on. And that's also not the case in this country, right? At the most, our self-regulatory bodies at the most will put out a statement, if that. And another thing, which I think I've said this before also, is, I mean, I respectfully disagree with Arfa that this is not journalism. It is journalism. In the broader sense of the term, if you look at history, journalism has been used for precisely these ends. To incite hate, to incite bigotry. Look at Germany, look at Rwanda. They were all journalists. They did this. And these are also journalists. They're doing this. So this is kind of a no true Scotsman fallacy. Okay, because they're not doing this, so they're not true journalists. They are. And this has been the purpose of a lot of journalism for a long time.
So I think we need to change that. I agree that, this whole thing of how journalism is used for forever, and that's very true. But other than the obvious things that I think many of you have said, one thing that really stood out for me is, one is, of course, that state goes after these guys. When they went to arrest him, and I don't know if anyone noticed this, and we live in an age where political is personal, personal is political. So this may seem like a personal comment on him, but I think it tells you a lot about the guy. When the police came in, at least in my view, I think the first instinct of every human being is to protect their children. Yeah, I firmly believe that. I think that's the purpose of our existence only, to protect our children. When I saw him putting his child in harm's way, I didn't have much respect for him ever. I think he's a vile, horrible, disgusting man. I was like, dude, how low do you have to be to do that? I mean, I think any decent person's response would have been, beta, you go in, or wife, you go in, let me handle this. They would have said, don't do this, isko pakdo, usko. Now he's fucking got
He's shouting, Shama.
He's got a fire against his wife and his son. Yeah, his son is 19, 20. He has his whole life to lead. You're dragging him into your shit. I mean, I think any decent person would have told his family, go in, I will handle this. Not a doctor bulao, pat pakdo beta, and his son is popping in. And this is when I think that, Prateek had one day was watching Republic and he texted me, dange karayega. That Palghar thing. I don't know whether you saw this one particular night. He was saying, ye dekho, phir se dekho, yahan pe mara, phir dekho. It was a very disturbing video of this sadhu being beaten. And then he was saying, ye kisne karaya hai, inhone karaya hai, unse badla lo. Matlab, he was going off and he said, dange karayega. I said, I'm sure whether he'd actually want dangas. Maybe he's just too stupid to realize what this can happen, what this can do. I'm thinking a guy whose first instinct is not to protect his own child is beyond redemption. So that struck me like, wow. I was like, my God, that's his son there. And that was not his first instinct. And like Manisha said, what he has done in, demonizing Umar Khalid and the kind of names he's called them, and Mehraj said, they can't fight back. The state can fight back. And on this, I'm actually, on the fence. Like, is he a journalist? Is he not a journalist? Like, whether he is or not, I think the pressure to condemn action should not be on journalists. It should be on Dolly Bindra, KRK, all the other reality show stars, that you have to stand up for your own. So the pressure has to be on them. That one reality show star has been arrested. What are the other reality show stars doing? So I reject that pressure on journalists. And the other thing that I find very amusing, and I think this is what kind of separates the Hindu right, I won't say conservatives, because there's several reasonable members of the conservative movement also, with the Lutyens, is that, this one, Open India carried a piece, those who mocked Arnab have been slapped by a case by the same government. Yes, we have, and we will fight it. And we don't want your Arnab support. In fact, the day Open India or Arnab puts out a show supporting us, I will say, what have we done? Humne kya kar diya?
Seriously, I felt like saying boo. We were really counting on your support.
Why do you want our support? We don't give a shit about your support because you don't stand for anything. So I find it amusing that anyone would think, at least people like Newslaundry and those who work here give a rat's ass whether Open India supports us or whether Arnab doesn't. We will still mock him. Tomorrow, if there's another police case by Uddhav Thackeray's government on us, we will still mock Arnab and we will fight Uddhav Thackeray's government. We don't have to bloody pander to one or the other. And finally, I think the best thing is that because of the lineup of all the cabinet ministers to condemn this, they have set a precedent. Ab bachchu jab bhi hoga, hum aapse puchenge.
And I just want to say one last thing, that even if we are to believe that this is injustice and it is unfair to do all of this to Arnab, I think he is one of the nation builders of this nation of 2020. ये 2020 के भारत का राष्ट्र निर्माताओं में से एक है. There were nation builders like Nehru, like Gandhi, like Azad, like Ambedkar. Now 2020 ka India reflects and represents what Arnab Goswami is. So if there is anybody to blame what happened to Arnab Goswami, it is Arnab Goswami himself. He has created and built this nation where police can actually barge into your house, do whatever with your family, with your children. This was happening to all other people for the last 6 years. I am still not saying that I am feeling the sadistic pleasure. I shouldn't as a human, because I feel that I have to show maybe better as usul ki baat agar aa jati hai. But somewhere I am grinning, somewhere I have to admit this, that I'm thinking that this is karma for him.
Okay, now I want to discuss this entire, debate that has, come up in Europe. What happened? We discussed last week the beheading of a school teacher in France, and Manisha had given a background of he had shown these cartoons, and in the whole, I don't know, it was a class on free speech or whatever it was, and he was beheaded. That cartoon, I think, was projected onto the building to kind of uphold the values of free speech, and we've had a discussion on that last week. And following that, there was another attack in France where I think it was a Tunisian immigrant who came and killed 3 people in the Notre Dame church, if I'm not wrong. And then there was a shooting in Austria where 4 people died. And I just like the panel's view on this, but I have one email about this because it's exactly about this issue. And after that, if you could start with Arfa and then just get the panel's view on this. So this email is from Shruti. It says, I hope all of you are well. I love listening to you guys. I had some views regarding the discussion on France and the freedom of expression, which explains my mail. I study sociology in LSR, and we have a paper called Sociology of Religion. After studying the paper for about 4 months, one thing that we've learned is that every religion goes through its own evolution. I agree with Manisha when she says that the situation in France is complex and they have failed to integrate the French Arabs into society. However, when one delves deeper into the reason of the problem, we find that there is a strong sense of ethnocentrism within the French. I'm personally sympathetic towards Macron. However, even he is a product of his conditioning. This got projected when he said that Islam should adapt itself to French Enlightenment. Perhaps this was an articulation problem or deep-rooted ethnocentrism, but this does not help his case. Islam has gone through the Enlightenment of its own. For instance, the Sufi interpretation of Islam is one of many. There are Muslim poets like Abu Nuwas who worshipped alcohol during the days of Islam, early age of Islam. It was only the 10th century when orthodoxy began to seep in. I have a problem with the wordings Macron used. French as a civilization or culture, not the only ones who went through revolution and reforms. These ideas are embedded somewhere in the past of Islam as well. And if one has to bring constructive change, then it is best to look at these versions of Islam or the voices of dissent which Islam accommodates during its time. I have mentioned this before and I will say it again. You are all the shimmer of light in bleak times. Love, Shruti. Thank you, Shruti, for that very well-articulated mail. And Arfa, you know what's been happening there. How do you react as someone who upholds free speech? As a Muslim woman, do you feel the same pressure that you feel on Arnab? that you have to contest?
Abhinandan, it's such a complex issue. Trust me, if you ask me, I have no position to take. All I can say is that as I am not a very practicing Muslim, I do not really wear my religion on my sleeve. I find myself as a part of this social group called Muslims in India, which has more of a social cultural heritage. So even despite the fact that I am not someone who maybe is all the time guided by what the religious book says, I would say I am hurt when my prophet is insulted. I may not be hurt just by the caricature, by just a cartoon, or if it's like a harmless cartoon, just the very fact that iconography is not permissible in Islam. And that is why I would be hurt if prophet's cartoon or caricature is there. I would be hurt as I would be hurt if someone were to insult my mother, if someone to insult my grandmother or my father. I will feel bad. So I will feel terribly bad if there are nasty, horrible things said for my prophet. Prophet, I believe, it was one of he has been one of the greatest world leaders, religious leaders. I would still not say the greatest, because when I had put out a tweet, there were a lot of people saying that, no, just say the greatest. Again, this supremacy thing, like I would respect your prophet, Abhinandan, as much as I would prophet mine. For you, your prophet may be the greatest. For me, my prophet is the greatest. So I would say one of the greatest. But I truly, there is one thing where I have no confusion, is that only Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's teachings teach me to not adopt to violence, to respect people, their disagreements, and freedom of expression. I don't know whether I can really relate to the French Enlightenment, as Macron said. I think this also comes from a very supremacist place, that, his way is the only way and other religions and other whatever. I really do not want to comment on this, but I think this is completely unnecessary, especially at a time when we are going through so much, when the humanity is going through so much. I cannot strictly go.
What is unnecessary? You're talking about Macron's speech, or?
I would say the part of his speech is very provocative. And if I were to make that speech, I would say a large part of it I agree with, but some part of it I think I completely do not agree with. But what I'm saying, so do I feel the pressure to make myself clear? There are at least 3 people on Twitter who are not very, I would say, not very close friends, but they are friends. They said that I am in denial of the Islamists and their actions in India. When I tried to say, I said I put out an unconditional condemnation of what happened in France. Even Prophet would not have approved of it. But second, I said, I refuse to take this pressure from the people who do not condemn even the cow-related killings, the propaganda of love jihad, voting a person who was charged with terrorism to Indian Parliament. The last person I would take it from is those people. So they said, oh, this is whataboutery and I'm in denial and things like that. So this is never going to be enough. So the problem is that even so-called the Hindu liberals, they think that the accountability of Indian Muslims is actually towards Indian Hindus, not towards their own conscience, towards themselves. So this huge pressure I felt, like it was kind of thrown on me, which I refused to take, that at least I'm not going to take it from you.
Right. So I shall not put you under any more pressure to answer, because I know you have to go. So Arfa, do please carry on. And thank you for your time. And we look forward to more of your reports from Bihar. And if I were you, I'd get tested, dude.
I'm fine now. It's been over a week. Yeah.
And before you go, a recommendation, please.
So I enjoyed being on this program a lot. Thank you to your audience. And I think the series, which I thoroughly enjoyed, I'm not so much of a very TV person, but a suitable boy. I watched this film, and for very frivolous reasons, I liked it. I liked it for the
clothes.
Yeah,
really beautiful. Yeah, gorgeous clothes.
Yeah, for the saris. Oh my God, I wanted every sari, every dress worn by at least Lata, the lead in the series. And also, I like this whole colonial look in the film. Like I wanted every piece of furniture.
That's true. Even when we had reviewed it, I thought the art direction of all Meera's films are just outstanding. I mean, just the
amazing.
Art direction is amazing. So thanks, Arfa. Have a good weekend. Have a good week, and good luck with the reporting here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Now, before I move on to our in-house panel, there's another mail from Sandeep Khatikar on the similar issue. So I'll just read that. Sandeep says, this mail is regarding the Hafta's discussion on the French beheading. It was unsettling to hear some of the opinions expressed. Anand's argument of disapproving of the cartoons, attributing them to just an attempt to prove a point because they challenged the beliefs of millions of people, was rather tame. Also found Jayashree's contention of ascribing the French government's response to Islamophobia more than anything else simplistic. The incident did stem out of an intolerance from extremism in the religion, and it's only right that it's called out that way. Being a free speech absolutist, I find it deeply problematic that journalists and news professionals don't subscribe to the idea. It's interesting how journalists tread that thin line between personal faith and bias with matters of religion. Probably something you won't find on, let's say, a story on competitive sport. I couldn't but overlook the offense Anand took at Abhinandan's Hindu nut jibe. Hafta's no-holds-barred banter format is what makes it worthwhile, and I believe everyone should be allowed to express their opinion, however offensive one may sound. Being a person of faith myself, I find it funny how fragile some of our beliefs are, that a cartoon here or an internet meme there makes us insecure, sums up religion and the fallacy of religion. Journalists should strive to be open and free of notions around borders, nationalism and religion, but that's too much to ask for. Thanks and keep up the good work, Sandeep. So last week we had kind of discussed this, and Anand isn't here, but he was of the view that these kind of cartoons are just made to provoke, and he doesn't think one should make them. So that is what Sandeep was talking about. So anyway, so since I heard the Austrian, I think that was the president's speech, where he worded it a lot more carefully than Macron worded his, where he kind of made the distinction in religion being beyond this specific, and there being no pressure on people who follow that to either, feel insecure or pressured. I mean, it was a better worded kind of speech. It was on the BBC podcast. But on this, what is your view? You think Macron's response was too much? It is xenophobic or Islamophobic? Can that and the extremism denial exist in the same kind of context? Mehraj.
I said, I think the Hafta before last also, that the reaction to it, the whole incident, was Islamophobia. I mean, there's no doubt about it. If you look at what Macron has been saying, if you look at how they projected like the whole thing, I mean, it was the French principle they claim is that they won't interfere in matters of religion. I mean, it's one thing for a magazine, for a journalistic organization to publish cartoons, however bad you may think they are or good they are. It's another thing for a government to project those onto a government building. And these, I think I agree with Anand's larger point. I don't know about the specifics, but the larger point that these cartoons, they aren't so innocent. I mean, when you're saying, say, for example, you're mocking the Prophet, but the cartoons you draw, what you get from seeing those cartoons is this trope of the dirty Arab extremist. That is not much different from similar cartoons have been used in the past, for example, against Jews, right? So you'll draw a Jewish moneylender and you will project him in this very caricaturish, in this very tropish kind of a thing. Same thing here. And this whole idea that the French really stand for freedom of expression, I mean, it's bogus. Just look what's happening there. Insulting the French flag is an offense. Anti-Semitism is banned, as it should be in France, but the definition is so wide that even if you criticize human rights violations in Israel, if you are a supporter of BDS, boycott, investment sanctions campaign against Israel, you can go to jail. So about the Macron thing, he is no champion of freedom of expression. He is facing an election and he wants to sort of appeal to the right wing in France, which has been rising like steadily over the last few years. If you would allow me, I think when this whole Corona or jihad started in India and Jamaat-e-Islami, Tablighi Jamaat was maligned and everything.
Corona bomb.
So if you remember, I wrote an article. So it was in the Indian context particularly. And I was saying, just let me read this line, that how Islamophobia basically, quote unquote, is cast as a bogeyman for many an incompetent journalist and a malevolent politician to make career whipping up hysteria over. I think the exact same thing applies in France right now. If you remember a couple of years ago, I think it was at the Sorbonne University, the Students' Union president is a Muslim girl. And she gave an interview, I think on TV or wherever, wearing a scarf, the hijab. There was such a hue and cry over that, because she wore a scarf in an interview. So this idea that they're champions of freedom of speech and this is only about freedom of speech and it's nothing to do with the demonization of Muslims, it's nothing to do with Islamophobia, I think it's disingenuous. Right now, when this thing happened, the attack in Nice happened, around the same time there was an attack in Lyon. A priest was killed. Immediately there were headlines, oh, this is a terrorist attack, this is a terrorist attack. It turned out that he was killed by another priest. Terrorism disappeared from headlines. There was an attack in Avignon by a right-wing white supremacist against an Arab. As long as the identity of the attacker was not known, it was terrorism. As soon as the identity became clear, terrorism is gone from the headlines. A couple of days ago, French troops bombed Mali, killed 50 people. They're claiming, there's no other source, only the French are claiming that they killed Islamist jihadists. In Mali used to be their colony. They're back there bombing them right now. And it's not even a headline.
But there are 5,000 French troops in conflict in Africa. I get that. But the one distinction, and I think this is the problem with the whole all-sidism, which also, I disagree with you when you put Yogi, all these in the same bucket. What happened with the Corona bomb jihad was clear Islamophobia in the context of there being nothing that people were responding to. They were just responding to a gathering, an opportunity to attack Muslim. Here, there has been a beheading. And I think this is the danger of when it seems that one is glossing over an issue, saying that this is the same as this. A person has been beheaded for showing a cartoon. And I don't think the response can be taken stripped of that context. I think what has happened, like even India, when that in Charlie Hebdo happened, if a sitting MLA at that time, I think something Qazi was his name, or Qadri, I forget. He was from the SP. He gave 40 lakhs for the beheading of someone else. Now, when that happens, now there was no beheading at that time, so it did not become a big deal. It was a small, a few channels must have gone at it. But let's say a beheading had happened. Then the response has to take the beheading into context, which I think is very different in what happened in France and in Austria. There has been a real life consequence of a young person, and not for the first time, for the same magazine, for similar cartoons. Lives are lost, and they are lost in the name of the Prophet.
Indeed, that's what I'm saying. So this is a crime. What motivated it? Partly politics, partly religious thought. So it is a crime indeed. So you have to respond to it, and this is a horrible crime. But when you are using that response to incite bigotry, to demonize like a community of 1.2 billion people. That's completely different. If that was the case, that you are just responding to this, I mean, the other attacks would at least have sort of evoked a similar response, but they haven't. Why? Because for this reason, they're using it nakedly for his political end, to its political ends. And that doesn't mean that what has happened is not barbaric. And another thing is this whole idea of terrorism. I mean, suddenly for some reason, it has come to be associated exclusively with Muslims. I mean, it's not just in France, all over the world.
Although I want to discuss this whole terrorism. I was thinking about this the other day because the same thing was brought up in a debate on television. But I just want to come back on the terrorism issue, Mehraj. But Manisha, you want to weigh in on this? I know you had, been very articulate last week, but the developments that happened since.
So I want to, just on the letter where, she's compared France's enlightenment to other countries, it's really not the same. And I think that's where a lot of people is just failing to grasp Charlie Hebdo, the pushback of the ordinary French towards this incident. The French Revolution was bloody. The overthrow, the de-Christianization of France during the Revolution was 99 priests, about 100 priests were killed. One of them was an 84-year-old. Priests were exiled. Church property was, nationalized. So you had this country where the overthrow of religion was brutal, violent to establish a secular state. Enter colonization. And okay, I'll come to the colonization a bit later. But what I'm saying is that the distaste for religion among French people starts from there. And it has a deep cultural sort of resonance because of the revolution. So it's really not the same as critique of a religion or whatever. They genuinely hate religion. And then you have colonization where, France went around colonizing northern African countries. You invited these guys, Arab immigrants, to your country because you wanted them to work for you. You did not assimilate them. And they do not share the same distaste for religion as you do, right? So there's a fundamental clash of civilizations. They are believers. They haven't had the sort of violent overthrow of religion that you did. And now you have, they don't share the same values, but you're sharing the same country. So I think, again, it's very tricky and I really don't have an answer to what the solution is. But I think when it comes to, I disagree with Mehraj where he says that projecting this on a government building is Islamophobic. Because look, discussing the aesthetics of a cartoon in this case is really the same as sending, meat samples to a forensic laboratory when an akhlaq is lynched. Eating beef is deeply offensive to a lot of Hindus. But if you're going to lynch, I will organize a beef festival. And this is pretty much what France is doing, that if you're going to behead, I will celebrate those cartoons. So I think the fundamental problem is that, of course, offense, approach to religion, these things, need a lot of conversations and communities to come together. And people, I would say even fundamentalists, in my dictionary, fundamentalists are not terrorists. They're just people who believe in the fundamentals of faith, and they can be extremely strict in how they believe in it. And say someone, a complete atheist or someone who dislikes religion, they all have to come together and talk about these things because it's just simply something that you can't come to a conclusion to. But we've established as a society, irrespective of religious beliefs, that killing is bad. So if you're going to behead, if you're going to lynch, I personally I don't want to listen to your argument on how upset you are about a cartoon or someone eating beef or carrying beef.
A couple of things I'll disagree with. One is that this idea that France is like an irreligious country. They don't have religion. They believe fervently in secularism. Secularism is a state religion there. France still remains a Christian country. I mean, you see all the surveys, you see all the polls. They are a Christian country. What happened during the revolution, it kind of what it turned France into, and that too after like World War II, is into this militant secularism where the French state sort of became the high priest, its bureaucrats became high priests of this religion of secularism. Until then, during World War II, during Vichy France, anti-Semitism was most rife in France after Germany. I mean, so many people were killed, and that was partly motivated by religious thought. I'm not saying religion. I want to make the distinction clear. Religious thought, anti-Semitism until 60s, 70s. It was really, really horrible. Now what has happened is, because of a lot of sort of a progressive movements, because of a lot of movements against racism and everything, anti-Semitism, it still exists, but it's not to the same extent. So they have found a new villain in Muslims. So Muslims are basically the new Jews of France, of Europe, in fact.
I won't deny the racism that exists in French society. I mean, you have Marine Le Pen, you have a front-running party that thrives on that. That is, I mean, that's not something that I would deny.
Now, coming to the terrorism bit, this is something that I'm always grappling with. What is terrorism? Because I mean, I always associate terrorism with an organization. Like, Nikku can't fill out terrorism. I mean, I have to belong to a larger organization for it to be terrorism, because I think terrorism is a very large press release of a destructive, violent press release of a destructive or radical thought. Now, whether it is a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu, I mean, I would neither call what Dara Singh did terrorism to Graham Staines. I think that was a barbaric act. Neither would I call what happened in France terrorism. But then, the question that I thought of was, so what is an organization? Is 2 people in an organization, 10 people in an organization, do you have to be registered? Because, this whole terrorism thing, I just can't get my head around this debate. What is terrorism? What is not? Because for me, a person going and carrying out a killing because of what he believes in, I wouldn't call it terrorism. For me, I always associate it with an organization. I don't know. What is your thought?
That's the con here, right? So the definition of terrorism, the agreed upon political definition, even if you go to a dictionary, the definition of terrorism is use of violence to achieve political ends. So by definition, terrorism is political. But because like everybody, I don't know if I think I shared that article on our group the other day about the speech Robert Fisk gave back in 2010 about the use of how journalists have come to use the words of power. So the generals, the politicians, they coin these words and we lap them up uncritically. Same thing to terrorism, because like the Americans, the British, the Europeans, they describe terrorism in this narrow way to associate it exclusively with Muslims. That has become the case. If you go by the original definition, all the wars that the Americans and the British and the French have fought in the last 100 years have been terrorism. In fact, by their definition, what happened in France, the killing of this teacher, for example, is not terrorism, but lynching of a Muslim by Hindutva people in India is terrorism. Why? Because that's part of a political project. The other isn't but then again,
that's where it becomes tricky. The political project, only the person who's carrying it out can say whether it's a part of a political project. Otherwise, everything else is speculation. It's like saying, what is your motive for making this cartoon? Is it to offend or is it to make a political statement?
Precisely.
There is other than that one person, no one knows. Is there a political aim or is it just random that I'm pissed off and I'm going to do this?
Indeed. In individual cases, no. But say, for example, Americans go and invade Iraq and bomb Iraq.
Yeah, I mean,
but exactly. That's as clear as it is.
The whole thing of the crimes against humanity, which, many people think that the government of the US has to be tried for that. I mean, if you can try, Milosevic Thanavo, who was tried?
The Yugoslavian.
Yeah. So, I mean, if he can be tried for war against humanity, for crimes against humanity, so can, Bush and Cheney and even
Obama.
But this organization affiliation bit is something that ISIS has changed, right? Because now you don't actually have to belong to an organization. You can simply say ISIS inspired and, it's a terror act. For example, the Paris bombing that had happened, these kids were from Belgium and they were not Islamist, or they weren't even believers. Like one of them was a drug addict. He had, massive run-in with the law, completely like that textbook, alienated,
disturbed
generation kid who then just says, I found faith and I found purpose in Quran and now I will kill non-believers or whatever. So it's just, even if he doesn't have any affiliation to an organization, he can claim for it. And that's something that ISIS really allowed for. Anyone anywhere in the world can just, claim allegiance.
That's the tricky thing. That's also the, that's the buffer that the political party here has, the Hindu right. Because, many of these Gorakshaks, they don't claim ownership of them. They are not from the Bajrang Dal or from the RSS or the BJP. They are just cow-loving Hindus. So, it is, I think, which is why I avoid using the word terrorism altogether, because I really can't understand what should or should not be called terrorism. It's too it's too confusing and too ad hoc. सब अपने श्रद्धा अनुसार कर देते हैं.
What ISIS was the textbook definition of terrorism, because they used brutal violence for political ends. And that was clear. That connects to another aspect with this case, the French case. The person who beheaded the teacher, apparently, according to the French authorities, he was somehow connected, or he had links, or he was inspired by ISIS. Same is being said about this person in Austria, Vienna attack. So
ISIS has
no. Now here's the kicker.
Decided to take responsibility for.
Here's the kicker. Even if say, for example, they had links with those people, the terrorists in Syria, the terrorists of ISIS and other jihadists in like all of Middle East, guess who armed them, who built them up? Even now, France is arming some terrorists in Syria right now at this moment.
On that, that's a bit like Dawood prospering under the Thakres while every other Muslim was knocked out. Somehow Dawood's gang wasn't. That's politics and that's governance and that's power. That's how it is. Yeah, Manisha, you were saying?
No, I think you guys have covered all points on this. I mean, the classic debate on this is obviously Hamas versus Israeli army, right? Like who gets dubbed as a terror organization. But, I just want to add one thing that I think in this Charlie Hebdo case, it's to Indian context, I find it, this whole thing of, people saying here that there are lessons to learn or that, I don't think it has any relevance or resonance in India beyond it being, of course, a big global talking point, because that's never been our form of secularism anyway. India has always been about not offending anyone, like practice your religion and respect all religions. I mean, that's the founding principles of our secularism. It's never been push the boundaries or offense or,
No, India, the very fact that our oral tradition has, is all about complying with what you're told.
No, but even as a modern nation after independence, I think most of us have kind of grown up with respecting each other's religion rather than questioning each other's religion, actually.
Yeah, that's true.
This is a broader problem, not just in this case, but this whole framework. This again goes to the same point I was talking about, what Fes was talking about. So we sort of import these frameworks, these phrases, these ways of looking at things wholesale from others. In India's case, from Western Europe and from America. So we use the same frameworks to look at what's happening in this country. And most often we don't understand because those frameworks, for the most part, don't apply. In India, you can't use the same framework you use for, say, Uttar Pradesh in Kerala. It's so diverse, it's so different.
Such as a framework, are you talking about like in the context of?
In the sense, for example, to understand secularism, for example, or to understand violence, say caste violence. What framework would you use to borrow from West to understand that? Because you can't, there isn't any. Then you try to use these racial, sort of the framework of racism from West and try to apply it in India. That doesn't work.
But in some cases it doesn't, but certain human values work no matter where. Like in the context of religion, I don't think religion is so unique in any context in the world where it is completely, above and beyond how it exists somewhere else. Like even for me, the most unique of them all, which the entire birth of it is about peace. Look at what is happening in Myanmar and Sri Lanka. So I think while of course there's certain governance frameworks don't work, sure, but value frameworks work. So I disagree with you on that because I think democracy is a value. Are we saying it doesn't work in India? It must, and it has to be made to work. It's not an Indian value. Democracy. So, and human values such as, if you don't like what I say, suck it up. That is a basic value about freedoms and liberties. And governance frameworks may not work, but value frameworks, I think, are universal. It doesn't matter where they come from.
No, that's what I'm saying. So when I'm talking about frameworks, I'm not talking about values. For example, justice is a universal value. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about specific frameworks to understand specific concepts. For example, like Manisha was saying, French secularism is not the same as Indian secularism. So when you, for example, are trying to assess the reaction, for example, the Muslim reaction to secularism in France, to Muslim reaction to secularism in India, it won't be the same because the contexts are different. The frameworks are different. Shekhar Gupta wrote this article a few days ago about how Islam was in crisis, and he made these 5 points. I'm ashamed to say it was so ignorant, I can't tell you how much. So he was talking about this idea of Muslims belonging to this grand, like whole community, the whole world community, the concept of Ummah, basically all Muslims are part of the same nation. And he was talking about how this idea of political Islam spread through Arab from here to here. And why, and this is the clincher, why Indian Muslims haven't sort of signed up to that idea. The whole idea of political Islam originated in India, in the subcontinent. The Arabs, even the Muslim Brotherhood, picked it up from Maududi. He was the originator.
Manisha, you were saying before.
No, I just wanted to end on that. I think more than Islam versus French secularism, what the French state really needs to acknowledge is colonization. What they did as colonizers, how they plundered over these countries, how they brought in immigrants and made very little effort to integrate them. And then to now say, chalo, Frenchify yourself is a bit much. I think that is more important to me because often in communities that are marginalized, if you don't have education, you don't have means to enter government jobs, you don't have means to representation, religion then automatically becomes your one sort of thing that you depend on. So I think there has to be more focus on assimilation than saying ki, then make coming to religion.
I think the change is inevitable of it becoming, more respectful, acknowledging everyone's, space that they live in, the values they live with. I think that's an inevitable correction that will happen, but it'll be very slow, because as long as there is the memory of an injustice, it is impossible to convince someone to let it go. Now, one can question, what is the cutoff date? Matlab, is the cutoff date like in taxes? You have to keep your taxes for 7 years. After that, the government can't question you. There is no cutoff date. Like, there are still Hindus who are outraged at what Aurangzeb did. Now I can't identify with that. I'm like, dude, like, fucking chill out. It's not relevant. On the other hand, I know Sikhs who say we will vote Congress. Theek hai, defer mein jo hua so hua, khatam baat. There are others who will say what happened in colonialism is still we have to get. So because history is replete with huge injustices, there has to be an acknowledgement of the injustice, and there also has to be the ability to let it go. And that process is way too slow to observe. It's slower than glacial, but it is inevitable, is what I believe.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's the fundamental problem, right? As long as justice is absent, you will have these things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just read a few emails. So I have devised this monkey balancing formula for those who say that I spend too much time reading mails, but many of you also want me to read mails to get subscribers' views. So I'm bunching all these mails into this one 10-minute, 12-minute segment. And because our new fancy podcast player, you can skip to only the bits that you want to hear. You can skip the mailing bit because it is segmented based on what all we've discussed. So the mails bit begins now. This mail is from Manpreet. I've recently subscribed to NL. I've been following your work for 8 months, and I wish to congratulate you and the team. By profession, I work in the news industry as a media executive living in Delhi. A shout out to Madhu, Manisha, Atul, Raman, and others. Basically everyone except me. A few queries. Does NL ever think of entering TV news genre? No, I don't, because TV news is a unviable model in the digital age. Then I want to know the benefits of subscribing to Newslaundry. Well, you support independent media and you also get a hangouts. In fact, we are having a session, I think it's on the 7th, if I'm not wrong. You can check our social media where it's only for subscribers. We're going to be having these every month. I will be in conversation with Gaurav Kapoor, the IPL presenter, talking about IPL cricket and his career. So, and many other such little events we're doing. And you also get access to the NL chat box where you can question the editorial team on what we've done right or wrong. And Atul in Tepuni 135 said that Tanishq Tata Group should be ashamed that they withdrew the ad. But as a business house, what else could they do? Any sane business will not want to go up against any establishment or public sentiments. Even though I realize that in this particular case, the fight might be with a particular section of society. P.S. I love your interview with Deepak Chaurasia. Aap chronology samajhiye. Also big fan of your moustache. To quote Ravish Kumar from NDTV at the time when Abhinandan came back, "Muche ho to Abhinandan jaisi." Thank you, Manpreet. But Abhinandan, the fighter jet Abhinandan's moustache is a lot grander than mine. Then this email is from Rand Tuman. It's very long, so I won't read the whole thing. But she needs to get this off her chest. She says the fucking NRIs in the UK are the worst humans. After the Justice for SSR, Nautanki and other centrist kind of species got hot and bothered to collect money for a billboard, this time to talk about Hathras, and approached me for advice as I'm a feminist author and blogger in the area for a long time. When NRIs make a hobby out of activism and performative gestures, social media campaigns, and fail to educate themselves about power dynamics, gender relations, and make actual social change, this is how they react. The failure to learn about politics and pick a side is their worst feature. They won't mention the words Hathras or caste or India or put up that burning pyre of the victim. So I asked, what is the purpose? She says, we can't look like we are shaming India and we can't link this to Hathras. I asked again and proposed, if you're really pumped up about doing something, let's write to the Parliament and Westminster and ask the MPs to put pressure on the Indian government to take action, or write to media houses to give international attention to Hathras. They rejected all this. Guess what they want to do? Rich NRI people take photos with some hashtag and post on social media, and none of the hashtags even mention anything regarding the incident. They are so afraid of BJP bhakts questioning them. They literally asked not to talk to NDTV or left-leaning media so they don't get accused of doing politics. What the hell kind of mindset is that? These idiots think social justice is a hobby for ignorant rich Indians bored at home due to second lockdown in the UK. So why not collect money for a billboard like Bhakts did for Sushant? I repeatedly said that the reason why you're doing this can't be, if they can do this for Sushant, why can't we do it for rape victims? Do you want the media to notice or even ordinary citizens spread awareness? but MP thing is too political. So basically, you get what Rantoman says. She says heart breaks into a million pieces. Just saw the news that the accused are now saying that the victim's family killed her as an honorary killing act. But much as many news professionals tried to spin the Hathras case as a family feud, they could not succeed. That theory has crumbled as it should have. And it is rather disgraceful that many journalists kind of tried to peddle that theory. Anyone has anything to add to these two mails before I move on to the next two?
No, go ahead.
Then Kabir says, I've been a long time watcher and listener. I'm finally a subscriber. I'm learning enough to afford a basic subscription. Earning enough. Not going to lie, a large reason for me subscribing was my undying crush for Mr. Sekhri. Thank you, Kabir. That aside, in one of the previous NL Haftas, there was a mention of Ertugrul and that not being proof of Turkish influence, and it was implied that it didn't count for much. However, I'll quote a really interesting Caravan article titled The Inheritance of Loss Progression. The article says, a Turkish drama, Little Ertugrul, which traces the trials, tribulations, and conquests of the emperor that led to the foundation of the Ottoman Empire, has become extremely popular among the youth, even among the intellectuals in Kashmir. Opinions are divided on the historic authenticity of the story, which resonates with Kashmir's despair and imbues hopes of assertions against the existing impotence. Some observers, however, are worried that such romanticism and symbolism may end up glamorizing violence in the name of religion. Whatever be the case, a section of youth seeking liberation from an oppressive climate appears ready to toy with drastic adventurism, unquote. When I read this to a close Kashmiri friend, he said that this was absolutely spot on. How true do you think this is? What with you or your colleagues having some contact with larger sections of Kashmiri media? I believe there was a Guardian article which said that Microsoft Research found BJP trolls are the ones also making Arnab-style Twitter posts on SSR. How true do you think that is on the ground? And will Bollywood grow some kujones, jo bhi kehte hain, to make something that rouses the public? Kabir. Thanks, Kabir. Manisha, you have something to say about the Twitter thing and the Kashmir issue. I'm sure Mehraj is best qualified to comment on.
On Ertugrul. But apparently this show is popular across India. Yaar. It's not that Kashmir mein log dekh rahe. It's popular. I think after Mirzapur, Ertugrul is one of the most
I've never
watched.
heard of this show. My God.
So what happened in Kashmir is, it's in Turkish, obviously, but it was broadcast in Pakistan with Urdu dubbing.
Okay.
Then from Kashmiris started to watch it, and it became sort of popular within a small segment of local sort of youth who are on social media and stuff and all that, because there was nothing else to do during the lockdown and the last year's communications blockade and all that. But to say that it has like this kind of influences, these are those kind of cultural critiques which you tend to like look at and you are like very sort of amazed by it and you write about it, but it isn't. I remember correctly, my parents used to tell me and people who were at that time that one of the reasons for a lot of people to take up to militancy were these two movies, The Battle of Algiers and The Lion of the Desert. One is about obviously the Algerian war against the French. The Lion of the Desert is about Umar Mukhtar, who was a Libyan freedom fighter against the Italians.
They called him Gandhi with the gun, he used to be called, right? He was called Gandhi with the gun. Omar Mukhtar. There's a very good film on him as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So, these kind of cultural critiques, I don't put much store in them. They're just, it's a passing fad. People are watching it. they sort of, it's kind of, given the background of Kashmir, what's been happening in the last 30, 40 years, and this shows this small kind of a Muslim tribe, which goes on to conquer Turkey and the rest of the West Asia and creates an empire. So it kind of resonates. But to say that it has like this kind of, and this sort of kind of has this Turkish influence in Kashmir is a bit too much. And even then, Ertugrul is not really historical, this thing. Apparently, the producer and director said that they only have 6 pages of documentation of that whole period when this is set in.
And on the Twitter posts on SSR case, this whole justice for SSR case and SSRians and SSR warriors is very murky. And this I can simply anecdotally, I can tell you that every time we get a tweet from one of those SSRians, it's usually an egghead, it's a recent profile, and it's all very targeted. One after the other person would say the same sort of thing. And I'm sure you should read Nidhi's piece on this, actually. We profiled 3 SSRians. They weren't BJP guys, I'd say, but they were BJP supporters. Like, they had the same sort of things to say on, say, JNU, Shaheen Bagh. But I'm pretty sure there was a coordinated effort in this campaign, which was beyond just aggrieved fans.
Right. So now this email is from Aman. Hi guys, continue your great work to keep journalism alive. Would like to hear Mehraj's analysis and his views on change of land laws in the Union Territory of J&K, would love to see interviews of intellectuals like Arundhati, Sainath, Yogendra, Amartya, John Reyes, and Anand on NL. I wonder which Anand he's talking about. Is it Ranganathan? But for that, that intellectual has been on several haftas. Check out some of the old haftas. He's spoken a lot here.
Check out the hafta where he says he'll build Babri Masjid brick by brick.
And also where he says that Arnab doesn't do journalism. He's a joke where he's found every night on a panel. But on the land use change, Mehraj, he wanted your view.
Yeah, so what happened is recently on October 26th, they brought a law called the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization, 3rd and 5th Order it's called. It has a longer name, but that's the short name of it. So what this order did is it repealed 12 state laws and amended 14 others. So when last year, when they abrogated the Article 370, at the same time, the Parliament passed a legislation called the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act, and it allowed the Indian government to make changes to this particular law within a year. That window closed on October 31st. So after that deadline, they couldn't change that law. So by changing this law before October 30, they repealed these laws and they amended these laws. And in a nutshell, what it does is, so after 1947, when the Dogra autocratic rule ended and Sheikh Abdullah became prime minister, so Kashmir, they brought in these sweeping land reforms. It's called the land to the tiller reform. So all these peasants who had been working on these on the lands of these feudal lords, they were given that land. And those reforms have been so successful. I mean, you remember that one of the usual idiots on Republic Times now was once complaining that Kashmiris still have rosy cheeks, even though they have been without food and under lockdown for a lot of time. So this is one of the reasons. I mean, despite all the lockdowns and all kinds of...
They won't starve.
Yeah, they won't starve. So this is one of the reasons. What these land sort of laws practically do is, it kind of rolls back all those reforms of the last 70 years. And there were other laws made in 1976, which put a ceiling on how much land you could own. So the idea was that it shouldn't become like it was earlier. So one person used to have like thousands of canals of land. It shouldn't become like that. They have rolled back these lands. And more problematic is what they have done is the government and the army has virtually unlimited powers to acquire land wherever they want, however they want. And you can't they have created this Industrial Development Corporation, and it has the mandate to acquire land for industry, whatever that means. That's vaguely defined. You can acquire land anywhere for any purpose, and you can't even challenge it in court. So it's
that is rather strange.
And related to this, now this is the problem. This is what we were talking about earlier, the media works and everything. The Hindu, their political editor, Nistula Heber, I think her name is, she interviewed the Lieutenant Governor of J&K the other day. And she asked a question about this, that people have been complaining that these land laws, basically what it does is it puts all of Kashmiri land on sale for outsiders. He said, no, 90% of the land is agricultural. So that won't happen because it's outside of the ambit. Either the reporter clearly didn't what was in the laws, or deliberately she didn't ask the follow-up question because the Lieutenant Governor was lying through his teeth to her. And she didn't ask how that is possible, because what they have also done is they have made it almost like just a signature or two away from turning agricultural land into...
Basically, you can do a Vadra there.
You can do whatever you want. And that is not the only thing. Now what they have done is, there was this Roshni scheme Farooq Abdullah had launched when he was chief minister. What happened is, back in time, like going decades back, even century back, people had been given land on lease to cultivate, to graze their cattle and all that. And then under the Roshni scheme, because they had this land in possession for so long, it happens everywhere. I mean, in Delhi, for example, there was that unauthorized colonies, that law. So people who had been living there, they were given property rights, right? Similar thing happened here. So these people were given property rights for this, to this land. And they have rolled back that also now. So they'll acquire that land also now. And that ties in with that, you remember that Sudhir Chaudhary, that land jihad thing in Jammu. So that's the whole Hindutva trope, that the sort of allegation is that it was only the Muslims who were given this land. When the fact is that the land given in Jammu was, I think, 10 or several times more than what was given in Srinagar. And now they're rolling back that also. So that was another land reform they're rolling back. Basically, what the crux of the thing is, that all the reforms, hard-fought reforms, of the last 70 years are being rolled back and Kashmir is being opened up for sale.
Now this next email is, this is the last one I'm reading because we are already 2 hours in. We've got a lot of emails. You can read all these emails on our website because they will be published. The people who have written as anonymous, we will remove your names. This email is from Barun Chanda. Hello NL crew, OG subscriber for more than 4 years here. Request you all to touch upon the Glenn Greenwald story as he quit the Intercept due to his own repression and censorship in an independent media outlet. He himself co-founded. Further, please get into Newslaundry's own editorial policy and how they would have dealt with a situation like this. Also, bring back the old t-shirts, mugs, comic books, and introduce some new ones. Had copped all the old merch during episode 100 Hafta recording as I came down to your office. Hey, Barun. First of all, thank you for your support. Thank you for coming down that time when you did. We have really cool merch, and part of this scheme, which is Diwali se Christmas tak, we don't have new t-shirts, but we have really wonderful new mugs. We have a candle, a scented candle, which you can light. We have a really cool water bottle. We have a bag and t-shirts and all stuff will also be coming. But regarding what happened at the Intercept, first of all, full disclosure, Intercept was funded by Pierre Omidyar entirely. The same person who founded Omidyar Network, who is also an investor in Newslaundry, but they have less than 20%. I mean, it's a minority investor and they don't have a board member, but it is the same person. But there, it was completely his investment. Here, it's not completely one party's. But on Glenn Greenwald, see, on him quitting, there are processes in place which are, which come within legal boundaries. Yeah. So, I have a view on the legality of things when you form an organization, and whatever has been agreed on is how that legality works. So I don't know exactly what happened inside, what their processes were. I know Glenn Greenwald has been, after initially publishing that whole dump of those NSA documents, and he had to flee US and UK. The last few years, I find him going on unhinged rants on social media. He is often on, he was on Tucker Carlson's show. I mean, what more can I say? So I don't agree with what he's become. I personally think it's because of the intense trauma of how he had to flee and how he was harassed. A combination of that and spending too much time on social media, I think, fries your brain. Just going by his public utterances, I would question his rationality. He quit because he said he wanted to do some stories on Joe Biden, which they did not publish. I haven't seen the story he wanted to do. I don't know what the evidence was. The one story on Joe Biden's son's dealings was apparently some laptop had been hacked into, which was at some repairman's repair shop. Apparently Joe Biden's son or someone in the office gave him a laptop to repair with all these incriminating mails. That story never made it to credible media because there was not enough in it. But if his story had something, I don't see why Intercept shouldn't carry it. But I would not just take Glenn Greenwald's word for it. I think he's fallen off. He's unhinged. That's my view. I don't know, what is our policy? Manisha and Mehraj can tell you.
Our policy to, on what? On people resigning, and what are the grounds of something?
I don't know.
Our policy is that whoever Abhinandan doesn't like is fired.
Right. That's our policy.
No. So I read the Intercept's response to, so I still have to read Glenn Greenwald's. I bookmarked it for this weekend. The piece that he said was censored because he put it out. So I have to read that, whether it, deserved the pushback that it got or not from the Intercept. But in response to Glenn Greenwald, Intercept said that basically they put out their version and they said that, he believes that anyone who disagrees with him is corrupt and anyone who presumes to edit his words is a censor. And this is very true for a lot of star reporters and, star journalists. They often take affront to simple editing or simple questioning that, okay, you've said this, could you cite the source? I guess they're so used to being worshipped, or they're so used to getting stories right, or being championed as great voices or whatever, saviors of democracy, that often it's true that they take very mundane acts of editing as an affront. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is also what happened with Glenn's case. Like maybe they wanted more sources, maybe they wanted more, information of where he was citing his stuff from. Or maybe they had simple editorial disagreements, which need not necessarily mean censorship. But on the other hand, I've also read, I like reading Matt Taibbi's stuff, and some of the stuff that is happening in mainstream American outlets is quite intolerant of an opposing view, because the thought there is that you can't equate Trump and Biden because, Biden may have things that he's done, but Trump is really an existential threat to us. So let's forget whatever Biden has done because Trump is who we have to fight. And that kind of doesn't go down well with a lot of reporters because
reporting is reporting, man.
Because reporting, they often feel that you can't
Sure.
ignore what this guy Biden stands for. So I won't be very surprised if he faced a lot of resistance for publishing of that story. But it's also true, and this is true in India also, a lot of star editors and reporters don't like to be edited.
We have had someone who has stopped writing for us because we wanted him to cite some things, and he said, "Main nahi karunga." Maine mat karo, khao kadi. I mean, fuck it, man. I mean, we don't pander.
Which is really bad because honestly, at whatever stage you are in your career as a journalist, most reporters at heart should feel good about, being asked questions if it's in the right spirit of making your piece better. Because ultimately the byline is the reporters. Desk gains nothing from making a piece better.
No, but in this case, what happened is apparently, and I can't make sense of it for the life of me, why any organization would agree to this. He had it in his contract that he won't be edited. And he had the similar contract with Guardian where he worked before, and with Salon also before that.
Typical of...
I don't know why anybody would agree to that, but in any case, if there's a contract that says that he can't be edited on opinion pieces, so then basically the Intercept violated his contract. And also the contract said that if they won't publish his piece for whatever reason, so he was free to publish it elsewhere. But in this
they didn't
case,
allow that.
In this case, they said, no, it will be detrimental to us or whatever nonsense.
So they were also being a bit, I guess, they were also being a bit obtuse.
And also this is true what Manisha was saying about like this whole partisanship, because unlike in this country, the establishment in that country is still this sort of liberal establishment which controls the media and the academia. And they have been very, very, very partisan towards Biden. I think because they're traumatized from what happened in 2016. So yeah, for that reason, I mean, it's true. I mean, it didn't even merit a story that the whole Biden thing. They didn't even, I mean, I saw this one anchor, I think on CNN, who is saying we can't verify it because we can't publish it because we can't verify. And the guest is asking, but that's your job. You're a journalist. That's the whole point of being a journalist. You verify stuff.
What was it? The same story with the mails from apparently?
Biden. So what happened is apparently he left his laptop at some repair shop and then he didn't pick it up. So this repair shop, he saw whatever was the contents, and there were some incriminating mails apparently about his business dealings, Hunter Biden's business dealings with Ukraine. And the allegation is that Joe Biden used his influence as vice president to fire a prosecutor in Ukraine who was looking at these shady dealings Biden on the company on which his son was on the board. So that was like unacceptable behavior and apparently a crime, but there's no clear evidence as such. And also there were some very sort of, in what way this country say, what do we say? Compromising videos of Hunter Biden.
I mean, I just found it rather implausible of a laptop of someone like him have given it to some shop and then the story was a bit way out.
No, but the thing is, I mean, nobody has denied that these are accurate. I mean, there are people have come forward who are mentioned in those emails who are saying these aren't fabricated. These are real. So the only question, the only sort of this thing is,
what is the source?
What is the source? Nobody is saying they're fabricated. What people are saying is, does it prove illegality?
Right.
US elections ka kya ho raha hai as we talk?
Well, as we talk, I think
Biden jeet gaya. Twitter pe to sab bol rahe hain Biden jeet gaya.
No, Biden, this morning when he started recording, he was at, I think, 254, but he's still not at 270 because he was catching up Pennsylvania really fast. And I think Georgia also, although he was behind. Right now, as we talk, Trump is still ahead in Georgia. Arizona, Biden is up by, I think, about 69,000 votes. In Pennsylvania, Trump is still leading, but in Pennsylvania in the morning when he started recording, there were still 700,000 ballots to be counted. So they're saying it will go on till tomorrow. So I pretty much think if he wins Pennsylvania, that's 20 seats. He's through. If he wins Arizona and Georgia, he's through. So I think Biden is pretty much through.
Our minister though is already saying, Javadekar, he tweeted out that we will be signing the declaration on climate change and all that. So he's probably figured out. But, actually, I don't have much of a view on liberal, non-liberal, whatever in the American context. But in terms of planet, I'm glad he goes there. Trump is just not good for the planet.
It's doubtful though whether Biden will do anything either. I mean, he's been
No, but
talking
at least
about
he won't go on a war
fracking
path and deny climate change and stuff like that. No, none of them are in. I mean, essentially, when it comes to industries versus climate, industries would always have a stronger lobby. But
there is, I mean,
the signing of the Paris summit and
it's always
upholding.
going to be incremental. And no large country is going to have a cold turkey solution to anything. I mean, this is what I mean, that all are not the same. Any change will be incremental, whether it is on religion, whether it is on power dynamics. Now, that incrementalism can be sped up a little by some, it can slow down a little by some. But
He was taking it backward.
overnight, no American president is going to say, we will come, all the troops on ground will come back from Afghanistan, Germany, Iraq. It's not going to happen. It just depends on the level of how the rhetoric, and actually, if you're going to pull out of the climate accord, then that is like serious shit. But let's cover the recommendations before we say goodbye. And before the recommendations, can I please request all of you to contribute to Newslaundry? As you know, we have a case also happening. I think we'll have another hearing sometime this week. We're going to put up a separate page for our legal fund. I think we've already spent maybe, I think, 250,000 or 260,000. I think the cost of this will go north of 3 lakh. So we'll set up a separate legal fund, because I think as we get more and more relevant, which clearly we are getting, we'll get more and more legal cases on us, which we will happily fight without the support. And please don't support us, Republic of India, because that would be a disgrace. We'll fight in court with all the forces and resources at our disposal. And Prateek will continue to do the reporting he's doing. We shall not be intimidated by any large political parties or media outfits. And you can write into us at contact@newslaundry.com. I repeat, contact@newslaundry.com with your suggestions and recommendations. And do pick up your Diwali and Christmas gifts from the Newslaundry merch swag, because you'll be giving a good gift and supporting independent media. So recommendations, ladies and gents. Mehraj?
Since we were talking about the land laws in Kashmir, there's this piece on Inverse Journal written by Muzammil Jalil. It's titled New Land Laws Put All of Kashmir Up for Sale. And it explains in great detail exactly what's happening and what's going to happen. And another piece, it's a little older. It's in the New York Times. It's called The Erasure of Mesut Ozil. It's about this Arsenal football player who dared to question the Chinese treatment of the Uyghur Muslims. And he has been pretty much what he had to suffer through it, and the professional and personal consequences of that. I mean, it's a fascinating read in the context of this whole, this freedom of speech issues and this whole thing. It's really...
Yeah, he's even because he, I think, went and had a photograph with Erdogan. He was criticized for that. Then today, I think whenever it was Shah Rukh's birthday, he's tweeted a picture of him with Shah Rukh.
Yesterday.
So yeah, Ozil has got a lot of, right. Thank you for that, Mehraj. Manisha?
So definitely our report on how Prateek is being hounded by the Pawar-backed Sakal Times, simply because we reported on layoffs. I watched Scam, so I would highly recommend that on Sony Live. And apart from glimpses into stock exchange and how things, happened back then, and of course Harshad Mehta's life, it's also great to see how journalism functioned back then. You had the RBI governor giving tip-offs. Journalists would be invited by politicians to look into files and probes. And there was, all said and thus, there was this public interest that, that you can see in that movie of even politicians and bureaucrats wanting the truth out for public consumption, reaching out to journalists for that. I can't imagine that happening today. An RBI governor giving a tip-off to a journalist, or politicians inviting a journalist to scrutinize, JPC files. So I thought it was really nice. And also Harshad Mehta, giving an interview to Sucheta Dalal after everything that she'd reported on him. There was this understanding that, okay, you were doing your job, I was doing my job. Very different from times that we are in today. And also a piece on CNBC TV 18 on Harshad Mehta again, and whether he was a mastermind or a fall guy of security scam.
Right. So thank you for that. I too would recommend you read the case of Prateek's reporting, and also Pratap Bhanu's Mehta's piece, which is last Thursday on November 5th, in defense of liberty. It is time to stand up for individual freedoms against all challengers. This I had actually read over the weekend, although it was last week. I think it's a good piece. It's nuanced. It's the context of what happened in France. And I guess it has it's relevant on many levels. So that's my recommendation. On that note, thanks Manisha, thanks Mehraj. Have a good weekend. I hope your tests come negative. hopefully next week we can all record from office and Manisha can record nuisance. And
I'm on leave. I'm going home.
yes, you're on leave next
I
week.
won't be there.
So anyway, we shall see you next Hafta without Manisha, but with Jayashree and Mehraj and Anand and whoever else can make it. Until then, have a good weekend. Take care of yourself.
And happy Diwali to our listeners. I'm saying that in advance.
Oh yes, happy Diwali. You won't be there for Diwali. Bye-bye.
All the Newslaundry podcasts are available on Stitcher, iTunes, and any other podcast platform.
Please subscribe to Newslaundry. Help us keep news independent. To catch all our podcasts on news, pop culture, current affairs, and sport, visit newslaundry.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel.